So when we were working the code for the first JavaScript program, and I'm gonna make some undos right here so you can see better. You can see that we have this let name equals to a prompt. Here we're creating a variable, and the value of this variable is what the user is typing inside this prompt window. So there are three ways to create variables in JavaScript. It's var, let, and const. Basically, in the latest versions of JavaScript, var is already deprecated. You have to use only let and const. But I'm gonna cover var in this video and also in the scope of the values. So we're gonna start with var. We're gonna add a variable. You can create a variable using var, just by adding var space. Then you give a name. A name in a variable can contain letters, numbers, or underscores. So for example, you can give the name learning equals to JavaScript. And you can send this value to the console log learning, and save this, and it's going to print JavaScript in the console. So there are some restrictions when you are declaring your variables. So for example, a variable called days99 is going to work equal to 99, something like that. Console.log days99. Save this, you can see it's printing 99. But for example, let's say that you add something like 99 days, or any variable starting with a number is going to cause some errors. So for example, let's say that I want to send this to the console. So you can see that we have invalid or unexpected token. A variable can contain numbers, but it cannot start with a number, so that's important. Also, for example, let's add var underscore products, and I'm gonna send to the console. And let's add something like equal true. And I'm gonna copy this and paste right here. You can see this is working. A variable can start with an underscore. And also, for example, you can add something like products and underscore equals to 10. This will also work. But in my opinion, writing the variables like this can be a little confusing. So we can remove this. So you can see here on the top we have this learning equals to JavaScript, and we have JavaScript inside single quotes. For example, let's say that you add something like var learning. You can also add JavaScript with double quotes like that, and it will work just fine. But something that you cannot do is to add single quotes at the beginning, then double quotes at the end. That will cause you some errors. You can see that we have invalid or unexpected token. So if you start with single quotes, finish your strings with single quotes. If you decide to start with double quotes, finish this with double quotes, but never mix your quotes like this. So for example, there are some times when you are working with variables and the name contains more than one word. For example, variables with 2 or more words. There are some ways that is recommended to write these variables. So for example, you can add something like var first name. This is the recommended way. I'm gonna add Juan Pablo in this case. So this is known as camel case, and this is the more standard way of writing variables in JavaScript. You can see that this n is with uppercase. So let's continue working. There is another way. You can add, for example, first underscore name and create that variable. This way is known as underscore, but this is not really common in JavaScript. We're going to add another one. First in uppercase, the n of name in uppercase also, and I'm going to add my name. This is known as Pascal case, but it's not really common also in JavaScript. This one, camel case, is more common in JavaScript, and we're gonna write all the code using this way of writing variables. So when you create a variable with these values inside quotes, this is a string, but a variable can contain different data types. So for example, I'm going to add var learning equals to JavaScript, and we're gonna send this value to the console. This is going to be the same that we have before, but you can also create variables that hold numbers. For example, var age equals 20. In this case, you can see that you don't have to add the quotes. The numbers doesn't require the quotes, but of course you can add this like this. But this is going to be a string. We're gonna check data types in upcoming videos. And you can send this variable to the console also. Age is like this, and you can see we have 20 right here. You can also, for example, add another one called job. You can add this to true. This is going to be a boolean. Job like this is going to be true. So you can, your variables can contain strings, booleans, number, arrays, objects, functions, several different data types and primitives that we have in JavaScript. And of course, as I said before, we're gonna see data types in full detail in upcoming videos. I'm gonna remove this. You can also start a variable without any value. For example, var learning, and you can add console.log learning. And this is going to print undefined because the variable exists, but it doesn't contain any values, and it's going to print undefined. But for example, let's say that in the process or in the execution of the program, this value is, and it's going to be equal, for example, to JavaScript. You can save and reload. You can see it's going to be JavaScript. So you can also start the variables like this without any values, and then you can add the value when you are executing the program. So before we finish, I'm going to show you how you can start multiple variables. So for example, you can see, I'm going to remove this and I'm going to show you something. You can add, for example, var learning equals to JavaScript. And for example, you can add a comma right here, and instead of adding again var name, for example, Juan, you can skip this var, and right here you add only a comma. So this way you are creating two different variables, but you don't have to add var again. You only have to add this comma. So you can copy this and paste and save this and reload. You can see we have JavaScript and we have also the name right here. And following the previous example, you can, for example, start these variables without any values like this. And it's going to create two different variables. Just in case that you see the syntax in any example on the internet, and these variables are, or this is the way you can create multiple variables. You can add another one, for example, age. So right here we have three different variables, and of course none of these has any value. You can add the value right after. You can add learning, JavaScript, and name, Juan, and you can add your age, for example, and save this. And we're missing the age like this, and it's going to print the three values. So you can also use this syntax to create multiple variables with or without any values when you create the variables. So one of the main problems using var is that you can add, for example, something like var learning equals to modern JavaScript and send this value to the console log learning. This is going to work fine. But for example, if you add var learning again and you add JavaScript, and it's going to print the last value. And normally this is not exactly a good practice, because you can see we're creating two different variables with the same name. And in the next video, we're going to see the let keyword, which is going to be the new way that you can create variables. In JavaScript, var is deprecated in the newest versions of modern JavaScript. So let's see let and const in the next videos. So in the previous video, we saw the var keyword. This was the older way to create variables in JavaScript. In the new versions of modern JavaScript, you have the keywords let and const. I'm gonna add the keywords right here, let and const. And you can see here we have an example. We have var learning is equals to modern JavaScript, and we also have another variable with the same name, different value, and you can see it's printing JavaScript. So let's change this bar to let and see the result. Let's save this. And now you can see that we have an error. The variable learning has already been declared. So using the let keyword, you cannot reassign this or redeclare the variable like this. You can reassign the value. For example, if I remove this and save this, it's going to be printing JavaScript because we're giving a new value. But you cannot redeclare the variable like this. This is going to print an error, something that was missing in the bar keyword. So beside this, there are no difference between bar and let. So for example, I'm going to remove this. You can also create a variable name and give an initial value. So for example, I'm going to add my name, console.log name, and it's going to print the name like this. You can also, for example, override that name, Juan Pablo, save this, and you can see it's going to print Juan Pablo. So this works the same in let and bar. It's going to be the same. You can also, for example, start the variables without any values. You can add learning, and console.log learning is going to be undefined because we don't have any values, but you can add the value like this, learning JavaScript. And this also is going to be the same as we saw in the previous video with bar. You can also start multiple variables. For example, let product1 is going to be equals to book. And then we add a comma, and we're going to add, instead of adding product2 like this, you can add, for example, a comma right here and remove that let keyword. So this way we are starting, or we're creating two different variables. You can add console.log product1 and copy this and paste product2, and it's going to work the same as we saw with variables or the keyword bar. You can also start multiple variables without any values. So for example, I'm going to remove these values, and I'm going to remove this one. So we have two different variables. If I save this, it's going to be undefined. But let's say that we add something like product1 equals to shared or something like that. It's going to grab that value. So you can also start multiple variables using a comma and without having to add the let keyword. So the main difference between bar and let is that bar, you can redeclare the same variable, and in let, you only can override the value. So for example, and finally, variables can hold also array. For example, arrays. I'm gonna add a new variable called shopping cart, and it's going to be equals to an array. We're gonna see arrays in the upcoming videos, but you can add something like product1, product2, and product3, and send this value to the console, shopping cart. So a variable can contain any data type in JavaScript. And you can see we have the array right here. We have an array. And this is going to be everything for the let keyword. We're gonna write all the code, all the different projects using the let keyword in Const, which we're gonna take a look in the next video. So in this video, we're gonna take a look at const variables. Const variables. The main difference between const and let is that when you create a const variable, you have to give an initial value, and that value cannot be changed in the program. So let's see some examples. If you add something like const name, you have to give this a value. And I'm gonna say send this value to the console, name like this, and you can see it is going to work just fine. But let's say that I want to start this const without any values. You can see we have missing the initializer in the const declaration. So you have to add an initial value always when you're working with const. Something that is really important about the const variables is that you cannot reassign the value. So for example, if you try to add something like name and you try to add my other name, Pablo, just like this, and you try to save this, you can see we have an error, the assignment to constant variable. Because when you are creating const or constant like this one, you have to give an initial value, but also you cannot redeclare or reassign that value. The value of the constant is going to be always there. So that's something really important. Beside that is the same. So for example, a variable with the const keyword can hold booleans, can hold also arrays, 1, 2, 3 like this, can also hold an object. And we're gonna see this in greater detail in the upcoming videos. But the most important thing here is to understand the difference between var, let, and const. Var pretty much is already deprecated. You don't have to use var when you are writing modern JavaScript. Let, the main difference between let and var is that you cannot create a new variable with the same name as we saw previously with var. And the main difference between const and let is that const requires an initial value and it cannot change that value or reassign a different value while the program is being executed. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at strings in JavaScript. We're going to see strings and some methods. So let's continue working in the next video. So let's review the data types that we have available in JavaScript. JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. When we are developing or creating the variables, you don't have to specify the data type in the variable. The data type in variables is defined by the value, not the variable itself. If you already have some experience with other programming languages, for example C, Java, or C#, you have to specify the data type when you are creating the variables. So for example, let's say that you define a variable. I'm gonna add this let variable equals, and I'm gonna add a string. Here at the bottom, I'm going to add console.log, and we're gonna send this variable to the console. Also, we're gonna use an operator, so we're gonna use type of variable. So we can save this, and you can see we have the value. It says 1, and it says that this variable is a string. You can see it right here. So for example, in other languages such as C, Java, or C#, if you specify the data type for a variable, it cannot be changed. In JavaScript, you can add something like this, variable equals 20, and save this, and you can see we have the value 20, and now this variable is a number. And this is happening because in JavaScript, the value, this string, this number, is what defines the data type. The data type is defined by these values, not by these variables. So for example, you can also use variable equals to true, and you can see that the data type in this case is going to be Boolean. A Boolean, remember, is true or false. So if I change this to false, you can see we have Boolean. Also, for example, variable equals to undefined. Undefined is going to be another data type available in JavaScript. So in ECMAScript 6 and newest versions, we have also the symbol. So we're going to add variable equals symbol. And we can pass a description to the symbol. My new symbol. We're going to cover symbols in greater detail in the upcoming videos, but you can see the data type is symbol. So for example, you can see that we created a variable and then we changed the value and the data type also changed. So that's something really important in JavaScript compared with other programming languages. So let's continue reviewing this. For example, if you already have experience with other programming languages, C#, Java, or C, for example, you have float numbers, you have integer numbers, and others. For example, I'm going to add variable equals to 1. You can see this is going to be a number. If I add something like variable equals to 10.2030, it's going to be also a number. It doesn't matter if this number is a float number, JavaScript will treat all the numbers as number. Also, if you add something like variable equals minus 300, you can see also this is going to be a number. So all the numbers in JavaScript are numbers. You don't have floats, you don't have integers, other data types that you will find in other programming languages. Something really important about the numbers is that if you add, for example, variable equals 20, this is going to be a number. But if you add variable equals 20 inside quotes, this is going to be a string. So normally, for example, if you have an input in HTML and you read that value from the input, it's going to be like this with the quotes, and it's going to be a string. But there are many functions in JavaScript that you can pass, for example, this 20 as a string, and it's going to be converted in a number. We're going to take a look at those functions in upcoming videos, but this is important. 20 and 20 with quotes is going to be different in JavaScript. So let's continue reviewing this. I'm going to add booleans here, booleans. And for example, if you add a variable equals true, and you can save this, is going to be a boolean. If you add false, this is going to be also a boolean, different values. So the data type is the same, booleans, but the value is true or false. So let's review the null or null, and we're going to add another example. We're going to remove this variable. We're going to keep this type of operator, and I'm going to add let, for example, let bank savings equals to null. And we're going to send this to the console. You can see the value here is null, but if we save this, it's going to be an object. The null values are going to be treated as an object in JavaScript. So next, I'm going to add the undefined. Undefined is also a data type that we have available in JavaScript. So let's add, for example, let, and we're going to create a variable. I'm going to call this one person, but I'm going to start this variable. And you can see that it doesn't have any value, so we're going to send this to the console. And you can see that this is an undefined because it doesn't have any values. But if you add something like Juan right here, it's going to be a string. But if the variable doesn't have any value, it's going to be undefined. You can see undefined right here. So that's going to be something really important. When you are checking if a value is in a variable, it will return undefined if the value isn't there. So remember that we also have the symbols. So we'll have symbols. We can add something like symbol ES6 equals to symbol. And also we have something like this is a symbol. You can print this right here, and this is going to be a symbol. We're gonna see, or we're gonna take a look at symbols in upcoming videos where we are checking the latest features in ECMAScript 6. So for example, let's review the arrays. Arrays, we're going to create an array. We're going to add something like let languages, and it's going to be an array. Let's add something like HTML5, JavaScript, and PHP. So we're going to send this to the console, and this is going to be an object, and you can see object right here, because arrays are objects in JavaScript. That's going to be something really important. Arrays are not arrays or data types in JavaScript. They are objects. So let's review, for example, the objects. Let person equals to open the braces. I'm going to add my name, Juan, and I'm going to add country, Mexico, and we're going to send this object to the console. Save right here, and you can see, oh, looks like we already have a person defined, so we're gonna add person2 right here, person2, save this, and an object is an object in JavaScript. Finally, let's review the dates. So date, we're gonna add let today equals to new date, and we're gonna send this today variable to the console. And you can see that dates are also objects in JavaScript. At the end in JavaScript, you only have strings, booleans, undefined, symbols, objects as the primary data types. They are also known as primitives. So this is it for the For the data types in JavaScript, something really important about the variables is that they can switch from different data types. It's important to understand that data type in JavaScript in a variable is defined by the value, not by the variable like in other languages such as Java or C#. So let's continue working in the next video with more features or more fundamentals of JavaScript. So let's take a look at the strings in JavaScript. We're gonna add a comment right here. By the way, this is the way that you add comments in JavaScript. 2 slashes and you add this is going to be comment. Also, you can add multi-line comments just by adding the slash, asterisk, and here is the body. You can add, for example, strings, and then you finish the comment by adding the asterisk and the slash. And the next is going to be the code that you want to write in your program. So I'm going to add let name, and if you remember, we saw that when you are creating strings, you have to wrap the value inside quotes. So for example, I'm going to add quotes right here, and you can add name. I'm gonna send this to the console log name. You can add name equals to single quotes, and I'm gonna add my name here. Save this, and you can see it's printing Juan Pablo. You can copy this and paste, and remove that single quotes and add double quotes. The result is going to be the same, but if you remember, if you start with a single quote and finish with a double quote, this is going to cause you some problems. Again, if you mix the order right here, it's going to be the same. Double quotes at the beginning, single quotes at the end, is going to cause some errors. So avoid mixing the quotes like this. I'm gonna remove this. There is something really important. It's like, for example, I'm going to add let message, and I'm going to add something like single quotes, and I'm going to add then I said, hey, that's, and I'm going to add single quotes. That's nice. Then we add the semicolon at the end. You can see that we have some problem here. If I send this value to the console, you can see that we have an unexpected identifier. When you're working with this, you can fix this problem by adding double quotes right here, and like this, and finish this with double quotes right here. And this is going to print just fine. But let's say that you want to use single quotes, and right here we have another quote. You can escape the quote, and you escape the quote by adding backslash like this. So save this, and you can see it's going to print hey. Then I say, hey, that's nice. So basically, when you're working with these strings, you have two options when you have a single quotes in the middle of your string. You can use double quotes at the beginning and at the end, or you can escape the quote using the backslash. So let's review, for example, concatenation when you have a string. So for example, I'm going to add let, and I'm going to add learning, and I'm going to add JavaScript. And we can send this value to the console log, learning. So let's say that you are printing like this, and maybe you want to add something else. Maybe you want to add some extra information. Right here, you can add something like single quotes, learning, and then we add a plus sign. So this is going to concatenate learning plus the learning variable that we have on the top, and it's going to print learning JavaScript. And for example, you can make this better. For example, I'm going to add a comma, and I'm going to add modern, and we can add something like this, learning, modern, and I need to add a concatenation right here. You can see we have modern JavaScript without any spaces. So for example, right here, I'm going to add another plus sign and concatenate a white space. So save this, and you can see now we have learning modern JavaScript. When you are creating the variables, you can also, for example, I'm going to remove this. You can add let learning equals to modern plus JavaScript. And I'm going to add the space right here. So you can also create the variables like that. It's going to be a variable with two strings that are concatenated. And save this, and you can see we have modern JavaScript. So when you have a string and you add a plus sign, this is going to concatenate. But if you have numbers, this is going to make the addition. You can see we have 4. So that's really, really important. So let's add 2 more examples. Concatenate 2 variables. For me, the most important thing is to practice, continue practicing. The more that you practice, the easier these codes are going to be when you are working with the projects. So we're going to make 2 quick examples. Let learning, and we're going to add learning, comma, and we're going to add the text. It's going to be JavaScript. This is going to be a really simple example. We can add console.log, and we're going to add learning plus single quotes and space and the text that we are learning. You can see we have learning JavaScript. Now let's add concatenate variables with strings. This is going to be a more advanced example. So let's create a variable called band. It's going to be equal to Metallica, comma, and we're going to add the song, and we're going to add enter Sandman. So we're going to create a band and a song, and we're going to add another variable called let playing. And this is going to be initialized without any values. And we're going to add playing. It's going to be equals to playing plus, and we're going to add the band plus, and I'm going to add a space. I'm going to add by, and I think I make this in the wrong order, like this, song and band. And we're going to send this value to the console log playing. Save this, and you can see now we have playing, enter Sandman by Metallica. So you can see here we have 2 variables, then we have some strings right here, and we're concatenating everything into this other variable. There is another way to concatenate. I'm going to add, for example, let learning, and we can add something like learning equals to modern, and then we can add again learning, and we're going to concatenate from the previous line. We're going to add plus equals JavaScript, and you can send this value to the console learning. So you can see we have modern JavaScript. So using this syntax, we are initializing the value like this, but adding this plus sign equals is going to keep the modern keyword that we added in the previous line, and it's going to append the JavaScript keyword, and at the end it's going to print modern JavaScript. So you can add, for example, another line, learning plus equals at Udemy, and now you can see we have modern JavaScript at Udemy. So this is how you create strings in JavaScript. Normally you will create a string and you will give that value into a variable. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the methods or the functions that we have available when you are working with strings in JavaScript. In this video, we're going to take a look at the methods that we have available when you are working with strings in JavaScript. A method is a function that you can use, and there are several methods when you are working with strings, and they are only available with strings. So first we're going to create const learning, and I'm going to add learning JavaScript is great, something like this. Then we're going to create a new variable, output. This is going to be the variable that we are sending to the console. So we're going to add output like this. So for example, if you want to know how many characters are in this message, you can use the length method. So you can add output equals to learning that length, and save this value, and now you can see learning JavaScript is great. It has 29 characters or letters. Using this method is, for example, how Twitter tracks how many letters you have added in your tweets, for example. There is also a method to concatenate, so we're going to add concat, and we're going to add output equals to learning dot concat, and concat is going to take two parameters. First one is going to be the space, for example, in this case, and we're gonna add and fun. So save this, and you can see we have learning JavaScript is great. Then we have this space that we have here. And right here is the space. This one is the space that we have here. And then we have and fun, which is the last part of the concat method. So for example, if you wanna print this message in uppercase, you have another method, uppercase. We're gonna add output. It's going to be equals to learning that, and we're gonna use the method called to uppercase. Save this, and you can see we have learning JavaScript is great. There is also to make this lowercase. Lowercase is going to be output equals to learning dot to lowercase. So save this, and you can see now we have the same message in lowercase. So a method is basically like this. You add a dot and then the name of the method. Some of them require the parentheses. They are like functions, and some others like length doesn't require the parentheses. So for example, let's say that we have learning JavaScript is great, and we want to check if there is a special keyword in this message. There is a method called index of, and you can add something like output equals learning and a dot to add that method, index of, and you can add JavaScript. So this is going to return the position where this keyword JavaScript, which is right here, is starting to be printed. So you can see save, you can see it's on the 9 characters. This is going to start from here. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the white space is going to be 9. And you can see from here, JavaScript is printed, and you can see it's present. So for example, if I change this, and we want to check some, for PHP, for example, it's going to return -1. A really nice example of the usage of index of is, for example, when you have const email, and we have something like email@email.com, and you are validating a form, and you are checking if there is the @ sign in this email. So for example, in this case, I'm going to add check if exists on the form, something like this. You can add output equals to email that index of, and you check if the @ sign exists. And you can see if you have something like this, you can check, for example, if, and of course I'm going a little faster here, but we're gonna check if statements in the future. If you have something like if is greater than 0, you can add something like console.log valid email, else console.log invalid email. So you can save this, and you can see we have valid email. In the case of the person didn't add the @ sign, it's going to be like this. You can see we have invalid email because it's returning -1, which at the end is that it couldn't find the @ sign in the email variable. So of course this was a more advanced example, but it's one of the usage that you will find on the index of method. Then we're gonna take a look at substring, and we're gonna add, for example, output is going to be equals to learning, and we're gonna use substring. This is a method that you can use to cut the original string like this one. And for example, I'm going to add 2 values. 0 is going to be the starting point, and for example, it's going to start from here. And then is the length, how many characters you want to remove. So let's say that I want to remove the next 10 characters. So it's going to start from 0 right here, and it's going to count the next 10 characters, and it's going to trim this string. So save this, and you can see then we have learning space and the J. So let's say that you want to trim this. For example, you want to skip the first 4 characters. You can save this, and it's going to trim these 4 letters. Then it's going to return the next 10, which of course this number 10 starts from the beginning of the string. That's something really important. If you want to substring from the end, and this is the way that you are going to do something like that. Output learning that substring, and you are going to add the initial value. The initial value is going to be like this: learning dot length, and then you are going to use a -4, for example. And you can see we have it, which is this part that we have here, the last 4 letters. But for example, if I make this 6, it's going to be great. So using this syntax, the substring is going to start from the end, and it's going to start moving to the left, and it's going to print the next 6 characters in this case. There is another really similar, which is called the slice. So we can add a slice. Output is going to be equal to learning, and we use slice. And again, I'm going to add 0, 10, and you can see we have the same result. And in a slice, for example, if you want to trim this string from the end, you can add learning equals to that slice -10, for example, and it's going to print is great. If you add only a 6 right here, it's going to print great. So basically, when you are working with the slice method and you add a negative number, this is going to start from the end. So let's add another 2 examples. And I'm gonna add the split method, split. I'm going to add output. It's going to be equals to learning. Then we're gonna add a dot. And a split is going to take, for example, if you wanna split this string from this space, you can add split, single quotes, and then the space, and save this, and you can see we have learning JavaScript is great, and we have this in an array, but we get rid of the white spaces, and each of the sections, for example, learning is going to be the first one, JavaScript is going to be in the 2nd position, is going to be on the 3rd position, and grade is going to be on the last position. So basically the usage of split is, for example, when you have something like this. Then you have a const, for example, and you have hobbies equals to read, comma, walk, comma, listen to music, comma, and then we have write and learn to program. And if you add something like this, for example, output equals to hobbies dot split, and you split by the comma, you can save this, and you can see we have each of the hobbies in the wrong position in this array. You can see we have read, walk, listen to music, write, learn, and learn to program. You can add a space right here to remove that white space that we saw, and you can see it's working just fine. So finally, I'm gonna show you 2 different methods. One is called replace, and one is called includes. So we're gonna see replace first. We're gonna add output equals, and let's say that you have a string like this, and you want to replace only one keyword. You can use the replace method. It's going to be like this, learning, and we're gonna add a dot, and we're gonna replace this. Replace takes 2 parameters. The first one is going to be the keyword that you want to replace. Let's replace the JavaScript keyword, and we're gonna add single quotes JavaScript, and then the second parameter is going to be the text that is going to replace JavaScript. So we can add modern JavaScript like this, and you can save this, and you can see the original string says learning JavaScript is great, and this one will replace JavaScript with modern JavaScript. I'm gonna add modern JS, and you can see we have learning modern JS is great. And also I'm gonna show you includes. Includes is really similar to the index of, but the return value is a little different. We're gonna add output equals to learning, and we're gonna add includes, and I'm going to add JavaScript. Save this, and you can see it returns true because JavaScript is already part of the string. Learning JavaScript is great. If you search for PHP is going to print false because there is no PHP in this sentence. Finally, the last example before we finish is going to be the repeat method. So we're gonna add something like let greet equals to hello, and then we're gonna add output. It's going to be equals to greet that repeat, and we're gonna repeat this 5 times. So save this, and it's going to print hello 5 different times. So this was JavaScript and the methods in strings. There are many other methods that you can use in JavaScript, but these are the most common that you're gonna use when you're developing websites or web applications. So let's continue in the next video. So let's review numbers in JavaScript. We're going to add 2 variables. First, I'm going to add a comment. We're going to add const number 1 is going to be equals to 30, comma, and number 2 is going to be equal to 20. Let's add another one, number 3. We're going to add this as -3, something like this, -3. So for example, if I send these values to the console.log number 1, you can see we're printing 30. I'm gonna create a second variable. We're gonna add let result, and we're gonna make some math operations with this number, and we're gonna send this value to the result. So the result is going to be the value that we're gonna print in the console. So for example, JavaScript is a programming language. It can make a math operation. So for example, an addition. And you can see we can add something like result number 1 plus number 2. And this is going to make the addition. You can see we have 50. 20 plus 30 equals to 50. JavaScript can also handle the subtraction. So result equals to number 1 minus number 2. Save this, and you can see we have 10. So it's working fine. Next, we're going to add the multiplication. Result, we're going to add something like number 1. And we're gonna multiply this by the number 2. Save this, and you can see we have 600. We also can make some division. So division is going to be like this. Result equal, and set something like number 1 and between the number 2 like this. So you can see we have 1.5. So this is working just fine, and these are the basic math operations that you can make in JavaScript. There is another really popular called the modulos. Modulo is going to be equal result, and it's going to be equals to number 1, the modulo, which looks like this percentage sign. Let's add number 2. So save this, and you can see the number is 10. So the idea behind the modulo is that, for example, you divide 30 between 20, and the result should be an integer number. So for example, in that case, it's going to be 1, and the remainder, which is 10, or the residuum, is going to be the value of the modulo. You can see it's printing 10. We're going to make some exercise using this modulo in this same video. So for example, JavaScript also has another class for math operations, a little more advanced than these ones. We're going to remove this. So for example, you can add result equals to P. We're going to add result equals to math. Math, it should be in uppercase, the first M, then a dot, PA. So we're gonna save this, and you can see we have the value of P. We also have, for example, round. You can add something like result. We're gonna add the result equals to math that round, and let's add something like 2.2. Save this, and you can see we have 2. If we add 2.5, this is going to round to 3. We're gonna add 2.4, it's going to be 2 also. So we also can force the rounding numbers, ceil or floor. We're going to round up or down. We're going to add result is going to be equals to math.ceil, and we're going to add 2.2. So save this, and this is going to, and you can see we have 3, so this is going to round the number up. If you want to force the round down, you can add result equals math.floor, and if you have 2.9, this is going to round this down, so the value is going to be 2. So we also have a square root. I haven't used this actually in any project, but I'm going to show you this. It's going to be really simple. Result equals to math.square root, like this. And for example, something like 144, we can send this value to the console, and it's going to be 12. We can also get an absolute number. You can see here the number 3 is equals to -3. So we can add abs number. Result equals to math.abs, and we can pass that number 3. So save this, and you can see we have 3. It's going to remove the negative number, and it's going to convert that number into the absolute number. We also have power. Result equals to math.pow, and we can add, for example, 8 times 3, and you can see we have 512. And for example, I'm going to add another comment, get the minimum number from a list. You can use result equals to math.min, and we can add some values here. We're going to add 10, 8, 3, 4, 1, 4, 6, 3, and 7. Save this, and you can see that the minimum number is 1. If you add -3 right here, you can see the minimum number is going to be -3. You can also have get the maximum number from a list, and I'm gonna copy this paste right here, and I'm gonna change this from min to max, and you can see the max number is going to be the number 10. So let's review the order of the operations. I'm gonna remove this. So let's say, for example, that we have, I'm going to add result equals to 20 plus 30 times 2. Save this, you can see we have 80. And this is happening because this operation is going to be done first. So 30 by 2 is going to be 60. Then I'm going to increase this number by 20. But for example, let's say that you want to make that 20 plus 30 first. You can use the parentheses, same as we have in math, for example. And then this operation is going to be first, 20 plus 30. And then the result is going to be multiplied by 2. You can see we have something like this. A really nice example of this is going to be, for example, 20% discount from a shopping cart. Let's build this project. It's going to be really simple. So for example, let's say that we have a constant. It's going to be cart items. We're going to add this equals to 20 plus 30 plus 30 plus 40, something like this. Then we have the discount, and we're going to add const discount. The discount is going to be the total of the cart items divided by 100. And then outside of the parentheses is going to be multiplied by the 20%. Then we're going to add another one, const. It's going to be total to pay. It's going to be total pay. It's going to be the cart items minus the discount. So for example, here on the bottom, we're going to print the results. And I'm going to add console.log. and I'm gonna add total. Right here I'm gonna concatenate this, and we're going to add cart items. So if I remove this, save this, and you can see we have total 120. Next I'm gonna copy this, and I'm gonna add, for example, the discount. The discount is going to be equals to this discount. We're gonna apply a 20% discount from this total, which at this moment is 120. So save this. You can see the 20% of this 120 is 24. So finally we're gonna make another copy. We're gonna add here pay, and we're going to add this total pay. We can add a $sign right here. You can see we have to pay 96, and we have a discount of 24. The total without the discount was 120, and you can see that this is working fine. And this is a nice example of the use of the parentheses, and also the use of the math operations in JavaScript. So before we finish this, I'm gonna remove again this code. This code is going to be available in the code snippets, remember? We're going to add let score equals to 5, and let's say that we're building a video game. We're gonna send this to the console score, and for example, let's say that we are playing and we did something in the game that is giving us some points. We're going to add score plus plus, save this, and you can see that the plus plus is going to increment this number by 1. You can see we have 6 right here. If you want to decrement this by 1, you can also use score minus minus, and it's going to be 5. Now let's copy this. I'm gonna remove everything and reload here on the console. I'm gonna type let score equals 5, and I'm gonna show you something. If we add a score right here, you can see we have 5. If I add a score plus plus, you can see we also have 5. Then if I type score again, it's going to print 6. So this plus plus is going to increase the value after it's printed on the console. So let's clear this. Let score 5, we're gonna add score. You can fix that by adding plus plus score, and this is going to increase the value first, and then it's going to print the variable. And you can see now we have 6. If we add score plus plus, we're going to have 6. But if we add score, we're going to have 7, because this is going to print the result first, then it's going to increase the value by 1. The same if you decide to use the decrement, you can add score minus minus, and you can see 7 score, you can see we have 6. If you add minus minus score, then it's going to decrement by 1, and then it's going to print the value. Finally, I want to show you something. I'm gonna reload right here. We're gonna add let score equals to 5, and you have increments by 1 or plus plus, but you can also increment by another number. So for example, you can add a score plus equals to 10, and you will have 7 from the previous result, and it's going to increase 10 to that value. So if you're building a video game, normally there are enemies that will give you more points than others, and this is the way that you can control how many points you want to give the user when he's playing the game. So in the next video, we're going to see the comparison operators, and we continue learning the basics or the fundamentals of JavaScript. So let's review the comparison operators in JavaScript. I'm going to add a comment, comparison operators. So let's start working. I'm going to send these values to the console, console.log, and we're going to compare, for example, is 1 greater than 2? Save this, and you can see that we have false because 1 is not greater than 2. But you can add, for example, 1 is less than 2. Save this, and you can see now we have true. And for example, you can continue making comparison between numbers. Something really strange in JavaScript is that you can make comparison between strings or characters. So for example, comparing characters, console.log, and I'm gonna add inside quotes the letter E is greater than B. Save this, and I'm gonna comment this and save, and you can see we have false. So let's make the opposite. I'm gonna E is less than B, and you can see that we have true. And this is going to be really important because JavaScript is going to evaluate these expressions using the same order in the alphabet. For example, A, B, C, D, E, and C is going to be, for example, if it's a number, it's going to be the greater number. So if you add C right here, you can see it's printing, and I need to remove this, it's printing true. So this is going to be important. I'm going to comment this, and I'm going to show you something. So for example, if you add C in uppercase, E in lowercase, greater than, sorry for that, you can see that we have false, because in the order of the alphabet and the order that JavaScript evaluates this is going to be like this: A, B, C, D, and the greatest values are going to be W, X, Y, and Z. So A in uppercase is going to be less than C in lowercase. So let's comment this line, and I'm going to remove this. Also, we're going to check the equality operators. So for example, equality operator, I'm going to add console.log. We're going to add 2 equals 2. Save, you can see that this is true. If we add this inside quotes, you can see save, you can see also it's true. But in JavaScript, we have also the strict comparison operator, and this will check also the type of. So if we copy this, and I'm gonna comment this, but I'm gonna keep this as it is. The strict comparison operator requires 3 equal signs. So if we say this, you can see that if we have 2 equal signs, which is the equality operator, we have true. If we compare this using the strict comparison operator, you can see that we have three equal signs, and you can see it's false, because if we take a look here and we add, for example, console.log, type of 2, and then we add console.log, type of 2 inside quotes, you can see one is a number, the other one is a string, and the strict comparison operator will check also the type of. That's going to be really important. I recommend that you always use this operator. So one of the most common problems when dealing with these operators is that some programmers only add one comparison operator, and you can see that we have an error. When you're using only one, this is an assignment. When you're using 2 or more, this is going to be a comparison. That's going to be really, really important and really common when you are learning to program, to make a mistake like this one. So these are comparison. We have also, I'm gonna comment this and this. We also have not equals. So for example, console.log, we're going to evaluate if 2 is not equals to 2, you can see that we have false because they are equals. If I add something like 3, you can see this is going to be evaluate as true, because indeed 2 is not equals to 3. It's going to return true in this case. So for example, if we want to compare, I'm going to add, for example, hello is not equals to hello with a space. You can see that we have true because this space is making this string different than this one. So we're going to comment these lines. And let's compare null and undefined. And you're going to see something really, really nice. Null equals to undefined. You can see we have true. If we make a check with the strict comparison operator, we're going to save this. You can see it's false because again, the strict comparison operator will check the data type. In this case, a null, remember, is an object. In the other hand, the undefined has its own data type called undefined. So this is it for the comparison operators. You can see we can compare numbers, strings, data types, and a lot of different values. And this is going to be really important when we are in the if statements, the usage of the comparison operators. So let's continue working in the next video, learning the fundamentals of JavaScript. So let's review how you can convert a string into a number. We're going to create three variables. Const number 1 is going to be equals to 50 inside quotes. If you remember, this is going to be a string. Also, we're going to add number 2, and this is going to be a number. And finally, we're going to add a number 3, which is going to be 9, for example, in text. We're going to see something nice. So first, we're going to make an addition. This number 1 plus number 2. So we're going to add console.log. And we're going to add number 1 plus number 2. And you can see that we have 50 and 10. And this is happening because this number 15 is a string. And if you remember, when you have the plus sign in a string, this will concatenate the values. So that's why it's important. And I'm going to add the name of the lecture right here. We're going to call this one convert strings into numbers. That's why it's really important that when you have a number in a string like this, you convert that into a number. So there are two ways that you can make something like this. Convert number 1 into a number. We're going to add console.log, and we can use the function called number, and we can pass number right here, number 1 plus number 2. Save this, and now you can see that we have 60. Something really important about the Chrome console is that when you print a number in blue, that's going to be a number. If the number is printed in black, that number is going to be a string. So there is another way of doing this. We already saw the number function. There is another one called parseInt. ParseInt. Save this, and you can see that we have the same result. So feel free to use whatever function you want, number or parseInt. The result is going to be the same. So let's comment these lines, comment this, and comment this. So next, for example, if we have this 9, we can add something like this, console.log, and we can add number 3, save this, and you can see we have 9. So console.log, number 3, and save this, and you can see that we have this value, NaN, and this stands for not a number. It's not a number. What we are trying to transform into a number, you can see it's a number, but it's a string. It's the name of the number. It's not a valid number like these ones. So it's important to understand how you can convert a number in a string into a number, because all the numbers, for example, if a user is filling a form and you want to read those values are coming from a string, and you have to convert them into numbers. So that's why this lecture is important. But you can see if the user adds something different, it's going to print not a number, because this is not, or clearly this is not a number. So that's important, and I'm going to comment this. There is something I want to show you. For example, if I copy this and paste right here, is printing 15 and 10. So this is concatenate the values. Concatenate the values, because the number 15 is a string, and remember, when you have a plus sign in a string, this will concatenate the values. But let's review what happens when you have the subtraction right here. So save this, and you can see that we have 40. And this is happening because since we don't have the plus sign, and JavaScript knows that this minus sign is only intended to be used with numbers, JavaScript will convert this string into a number for you. So in this case, the subtraction will work. So that's also something really important. Of course, I recommend that if you have a number in a string, I recommend that you convert this into a number using number or parse int. So let's remove this, let's remove everything. We're gonna take a look at another methods and values. So for example, I'm gonna add let number, and I'm gonna send this value to the console.log number. And we're gonna try to convert a lot of different values from strings into numbers. So we can add, for example, right here, number equals to number. We can also use parse in, remember? And I'm gonna add 20 in single quotes. You can see this will convert 20 into a number. Next, for example, number equals to number. We're gonna add single quotes, 20, a dot, 20, 10, and 2. Save this, and you can see we have also the number. For example, number equals true. You can see that you can also convert a boolean into a number. The true is going to be 1 because, for example, if I copy this and paste, the false is going to be 0. So false are always 0, true are always 1, and you can convert them into a number using this number. Something really important here is if you try to use, we're gonna use parse in right here. And you can see it's going to be not a number because parse in is going to try to read the value from a string that is actually a number like these ones, but it doesn't work with true or false. So we're going to add another one, number equals to number, and we're gonna pass null, and you can see null is also 0. If we add number equals to number, and we pass, for example, hello world, it's going to be not a number. If we add number equals number, and we try to convert an array, 1, 2, 3, you can save this, and it's going to be also not a number because this is an array. And just to make a test, you can, for example, send this value to the console. Type of number, and you can see that the value is going to be a number, but it's not printing the actual values that we have here. So there are other options, for example, parse int and parse float. So for example, we're gonna use this number equals to parse integer, and we're gonna add 100 inside quotes. So save this, and you can see we had 100, and it's also a number. So we're gonna make another copy. Parse in stands for parse integer. So if you add 120, you can see it will only print 100 because this will parse the integer number. If you wanna parse a float number, you can use number equals to parse float. It's going to be, for example, 120, something like this, and it's going to be 100.2. So there are other functions. There is another one called toFix. And for example, let's add something like let number 1. And we're gonna add a bunch of numbers here, and we're gonna add a comma, number 2, and we're gonna add the same value but without the quotes, and I'm gonna add a dot and a bunch of different values. So for example, right here I'm gonna use number 1, and I'm gonna remove this type of, and we're gonna use toFix. Save this, and you can see that toFix cannot be used with strings. This is a function or a method that is only available in numbers. So for example, you can make something like this. Number. This is going to convert the string number into an actual number. And then we're going to pass toFix. Save this, and you can see we have the value. But there is no reason to use to fix if we already have a number and this number is a fixed number. We can add, for example, 0.1020. Save this, and you can see this is going to remove these decimals. But let's say that I want to print these at least 2 decimals. You can add a 2 right here, and now you can see we have 0.10. In the case of the number 2, in this case you don't need the number because this is actually a number. So we're gonna add number 2 to fix, and you can see the result is going to be the same. Let's say that you want more decimals, you can add 6 right here, and this is going to print more decimals. And this is going to be really important. This topic is going to be really important, since remember, all the data submitted into a form is going to be a string, and there are several functions to convert those strings into numbers. You have number, you have parsing, parse float, and also you have fixed, to fixed. So in this video, let's take a look how you can convert any, for example, number or boolean into a string. This is going to be really important because doing something like this, you're going to have all the methods available for strings in numbers, for example. So let's see, for example, numbers to strings, and let's create a number, and let's add a postal code. We're gonna add 9210, and also I'm going to add another one called output. We're gonna print this output in the console, but first I'm going to add output. Well, if you say output equal to number, and we send this value to the console, you can see that this is a number. This blue color is telling you that this is a number. You can add also type of, and you can see we have a number. So if you want to know, for example, the length of this, and I'm gonna remove this. If you add that length, if you remember, we have that length to check the length of a string. You can see we have undefined because dot length is a method only available for strings. So we have to convert this number into a string. And it's really easy, only add a string right here. A string. And save this. And now you can see we have 5. And you can see we have a string. So this is going to be a valid postal code because it has 5 different numbers. Of course, if the postal code is real, it's going to be a little different. But at least the length of the string is going to be valid, which is going to be 5. You can also validate, for example, the length of a credit card using this same technique. So let's remove this. And I'm gonna, for example, I'm going to add boolean to a string. You can add something like, I'm gonna add let output equals to true. And if we send this value to the console, you can see we have true and we have boolean. So again, you can add something like a string, grab this true into a string like this, and this is going to change this true, and it's going to be also a string. So let's review how you can transform a date into a string. If you remember, for example, if I add output equals new date, the date is going to be an object. But you can add something like output equals to a string, and then we pass this date. And doing this is going to be a string. And doing this, you will have all the methods available for strings into these dates. So for example, you can add something like includes, and then you can pass 2080. Save this, and you can see we have true. So for example, in this date, let's say that you have a banking system and you want to check if the client has made any movements in the latest year. You can do something like that, check for the date and use one of these methods. So I'm gonna remove this. So let's see, for example, how you can convert an array into a string. So let's add something like output equals to an array 1, 2, 3, 4, something like this. You can see if I save this is going to be an object. Here we have the values. If we add a string and close this string right here, you can see that we convert all the values into a string. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. There is another method called toString, for example, toString. And for example, if I try to use toString into a number, into any, for example, toString, you can see that we have an error. ToString is more used when you have objects. So we're going to add, for example, output equals true toString, and we need to comment this line. So you can see we have true. So this number toString doesn't work, but you can see it works with booleans. Also, for example, if I add something like output equals to an array 1, 2, 3 toString, save this, you can see it's printing 1, 2, 3. Output equals to, for example, an object name toString. Save this, and you can see we have object, but it's going to convert this into a string. This toString doesn't work with numbers, but you can see how you can convert numbers into a string using the string function. So in the next video, let's take a look at template literals or template strings. A really big change in how you work with templates in HTML with JavaScript. Let's take a look at template strings in JavaScript. This is a really big enhancement because in the previous version, when you have HTML in JavaScript, it was a little, well, it was a mess to deal with something like that. I'm gonna show you the older method and the new method also with template strings. So let's open the index.html, and here instead of having welcome, I'm going to add div id app, and the ID is going to be app. So let's open the app.js, and I'm going to add template literals or template strings. There are many names that you will find on the internet if you make a search for this topic. So then I'm going to add 4 variables. Product 1 is going to be a pizza. Then we're going to add the price of this is going to be 30, comma, then we have product 2. We're going to add this as a hamburger, comma, and finally we're going to have the price 2, which is going to be 40. So we're going to print those values. So there are 2 methods. The old method is going to be something like this. This method will use a lot of concatenation. So let's see, for example, we're going to create let HTML, and then we're going to build the template HTML equals, and I'm going to print this into an order list, and then we concatenate the next line. Then I'm going to add an li, and I'm going to add item, colon, then we're going to add a plus sign, and here I'm going to print the product 1. Then we add another plus sign, single quotes, and we close this li. Then we're going to concatenate this with the next line, and I'm going to copy this and paste, and it's going to be, for example, right here we're going to add price, and this one is going to be price 2, like this. Then we're going to add another line. So you can see we have a lot of concatenation here, and this one is going to be the product 2, and right here I have product 11. So I'm gonna remove one number from here. Then I'm gonna add another line. This is going to be the price, so price, and then we're gonna add price 2. So let's add one more. We're gonna add right here total, and the total is going to be the price 1. And right here I should add price 1 plus price 2. Remove this, but this will cause an error, so we need to grab this inside parentheses. So this is going to make this operation, and then the result is going to be concatenated into the totals. Finally, we're gonna close the unordered list like this. And then I'm gonna, for example, you can see here we have this app div or ID, and I'm gonna add something like this. We're gonna add let app equals to document dot query selector. Don't worry for query selector yet. This is going to be the way that you select the div where you want to print your HTML or make some changes. And I'm gonna add the ID app. Then I'm going to add app inner HTML. So we're gonna print this into the HTML. And the HTML that I want to print is this variable called HTML that contains the template that we have built in this video. HTML like this. So save this. And you can see that we have item pizza, price 30, and then we have the total, which is the addition between this price, and is printing this into the HTML. This is the old method. You can see we have a lot of concatenation here. So I'm gonna show you the new method. And it uses template strings or template literals. This is going to be a much more cleaner solution, and we're gonna use this in all the course. HTML equals, then we're gonna use these quotes, which is more like a backtip, and then I'm gonna add the semicolon at the end, and it's going to be like this, UL, and let's close the UL right here, and I'm gonna add an LI, and then we add item. Instead of having concatenation here, you print these variables using the $sign, then you open and close the curly braces, and then you use these variables, product1. Then we close the li. So this is going to be the new way, and you can see this is the old way. In my opinion, this one looks more cleaner, so we're gonna continue finishing this example. We're gonna add, for example, price, the second item, and another price. So let's add price 1 right here, price 1, and product 2, and price 2. Finally, we're gonna add another one for the totals, and it's going to be total, price 1 plus price, and price 1 plus price 2. And if you save this, you can see that we have the same result. You can even add a $sign right here. It's going to be the $sign. The price is going to be 70. So in my opinion, this one looks more cleaner than this one. One really common when you are using this method is, for example, if I remove everything from here, is that sometimes you lose one of these, save, and you have some problems. Using the template literals, you can see that you don't have something like that, and it's going to be a much more cleaner solution. Also, we haven't seen functions yet, but for example, you can create a function, the total, which is going to be, for example, price 1. It's going to take price 1 and price 2 in this case, and it's going to return price 1 plus price 2. And right here, instead of having this, we are going to have total, and then open the parentheses, and instead of having this sum, we're gonna have something like this, a comma, and this parenthesis should be before the closing square curly brace. And now you can see we have the same result. So you can add in template strings, you can add functions. You can see that this method is more cleaner than this one, and we're gonna use template strings through all the course, especially when we are working with the projects. We're gonna use this method. This one is older, so I recommend that you use template strings. So in the next video, let's continue working. So in this video, let's take a look at arrays in JavaScript, how you can create the arrays and the methods that JavaScript provides when you are working with arrays. An array is a variable that can hold more than one value at a time, and usually the array will hold related data. But let's see, for example, creating an array. So we're going to add a simple array, const numbers, and we're going to add the square brackets. The square brackets is going to tell JavaScript that we want to create an array. So if you see a square bracket, this is going to be an array in JavaScript. So we're gonna add, for example, 10, the data that you have in an array should be separated by a comma. So we're gonna add 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And usually the last item doesn't require the comma. So we're gonna send these values to the console, numbers, save these, and now you can see we have these 5, and then we have the array. You can click here on this triangle and you can see at the bottom we have array. And then we have these numbers, 0, 10, 1, 20, 2, 30, tier 40, and the fourth position is going to be 50. So this is now as a numerical array or an indexed array because it has these indexes. You can see in JavaScript, in almost all the languages, an array starts at the 0 position. So for example, if you want to print this number 30, you can use something like this. Square brackets and the position number 2. And now you can see we have the number 30. And you can access multiple values. You, for example, can copy this and add 0, 2, and 3, or 4. And you can see we have different values. So this is how you access the array. But you can see an array is holding multiple pieces of data into one variable. That's something really important. And I'm going to add console.log numbers. So there is another method how you can create an array. The second method is add an array of months. And we're going to add const months. And you can add, for example, using new array. This is going to be another method, but this is less common than this one. This one is more popular in all the examples that you will find on the internet. January, let's add a few months, not all of them. March, April, May, and one more, let's add June, something like that. If you send this to the console, save this, you can see we have the same result, an array, and you can open this and you will find the indexes on the left. If you wanna access, for example, June, you use square brackets and the number 5. And now you can see we have June right here. Also an array, for example, I'm gonna comment this, can hold mixed values. So for example, you can add const mixed array. And you can add, for example, a string, comma, a number, comma, a boolean, comma, another string, comma, and a null value. And you can send this value to the console, mixed array, save this, and you can see we have, if I open this, we have strings, we have numbers, we have booleans, and we have also a null right here. So I'm going to remove this code, and I'm gonna uncomment this. So let's review some of the methods that we have when we are working with arrays. So for example, you can check the length of the array. And you can add console.log months.length. This is really similar as the string property. You can see we have 6. And you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, if I send this value to the console, months, you can see that we have 5 positions, but this is starting at the number 0. The length is going to be 6, so the length is going to report the actual number. Then, for example, let's say check if this is an array. You can add something like this, console.log, and then you add array dot is array, and then you pass months in this case, and you can see that we have true. I'm gonna comment this line. So for example, if I add something like let name equals Juan, and we move this right here to the bottom, and we pass name right here, it's going to print false because this is not an array, this is a string. So let's see, for example, how you can change the values of the array. Change values of the array. Console.log, for example, months, and I'm gonna send the value to the console, the number 1. You can see that we have February right here. So you can add something like this, and I'm gonna cut this, and I'm gonna add the months one. I'm gonna add, for example, something here to a new month. So this is going to change the actual value of this. You can see we have January and then we have new month. So you can change the values of the array. You can also make the array bigger. You can add items or remove items. We're gonna see those in just a little. I'm gonna comment this, find something in the array. So let's say, for example, if I add console.log months.index of, and let's pass something like January. Save this. You can see it's going to be in the position 0 of the array. If I add something like December, you can see it's going to be -1 because it doesn't find this as part of the array, and it's going to print -1. So let's see, for example, how you can add more items into the array. So we're gonna send this value to the console log months, and let's add something like months that push, and we're gonna add a new month, July. Save this, and now you can see the array has grown, and now we have this new month called July. So it's important to understand that .push is going to add this at the end of the array. Let's add more items into the array at the beginning. Double N. So in this case, you are going to use another method, months. This is going to be the array, and then you use on shift. And let's add something like month 0. Save this. And now you can see in the first position we have month 0. Then we have January, and then we have February, because we have commented the line where we add the new month. But you can see we have an item at the end, July, and also the month 0, which is this one. So you can add elements into the array at the first and also in the last position. So maybe you wanna add any element in the middle of the array. You can use the splice function or method. Add an element in the middle. You use months.splice, and splice is also a function that you can use to remove elements in the array. So for example, if you put your mouse right here, you can see we have the start, then we have the number that we want to delete, and finally the third argument is going to be if you want to insert a new something new. So first the position, we're gonna add something on the third position, so we're gonna add 3, then we add a comma, and we're gonna skip this value because we don't want to remove anything. So we need to pass this as a null, and then the new method, the new item, a new month. So save this, and now you can see that in the third position of the array we have a new month, and this is going to move the other items, and it's going to reorder the array. So in the next video, let's continue working with arrays. It's a really important topic, so we're gonna create another video. We're gonna see the rest of the methods in the next video. So let's review the methods that we have to remove items in the array. In the previous video we saw, for example, push, on shift, and also splice. In these methods you can add elements to the array, and also you can remove elements into the array. If you are building a shopping cart using an array, you can use the same methods to add or remove items into the shopping cart. So I'm gonna comment this line, and I'm gonna move this to the top, so we can see the array and the new functions right here. We're gonna keep this here on the bottom. So for example, you have array pop, remove element from the end, and you can use, for example, months that pop. So save this, and now you can see we have to remove the last item, which is, in this case, is going to be June. You can also remove element from the beginning, and it's going to be months that shift, and this is going to remove January from the array. So here on the bottom we have a splice. Splice will add a new item, but also it's the same function that you will use to remove elements from the array. I'm gonna comment these lines. So we're gonna remove from the middle of the array, and we're gonna use splice. So you pass, for example, the name of the array, months dot splice, and save this. And let's say, for example, the splice will take 3 different parameters. So for example, the first one is the position that you want to remove or you want to add. In the previous example, we added a new element, but you can use also this function to remove anything. So let's remove this number 3, April. So you're gonna pass the position 3, and then the second argument. In the previous example, we added a new element, and we pass the null, the second argument as null. This is how many items you want to remove. In the previous example, we didn't remove anything. We add a new item. But if you want to remove, for example, you want to remove April, you can add 1. If you add 2, in this case, it's going to remove April and May. If you add a number 3, it's going to remove April, May, and June. So this is how many items you want to remove. In this case, I want to remove only 1. If you pass a third argument, then it's going to add a new element into the array, as we did here. In this case, we only want to remove this from the array. So save this and open this again. And now you can see that we remove April. So let's review, for example, other methods. I'm gonna comment these lines. And I'm gonna make some space here on the top so we can continue checking of the other methods. There is another method called reverse. This is going to do exactly what you are thinking. Months that reverse. This is going to reverse the order of the array. Now the last item is going to be on the first position. Then we have also how to concatenate 2 arrays. I'm gonna comment this line. We're gonna create 2 different arrays. Const array 1 is going to be equals to 1, 2, 3. And I'm gonna add a comma, and we're gonna add array 2 is going to be equals to 9, 8, and 7. So we're gonna use a function. We're gonna send this value to the console. Console.log. And right here I'm gonna use this function. We are gonna use the array 1. And then we add a dot, concat, and then we pass the array 2. So I'm gonna comment this line also. And now you can see we have 1, 2, 3, and then we have 9, 8, and 7. You can also order the elements in an array. I'm gonna comment these lines again. So I'm gonna add some space here on the top. We can comment this also, yeah, we don't need this anymore. So for example, I'm going to add right here, order an array or sort the array. And we're gonna add let fruits is going to be equals to an array. We're gonna add banana, we're gonna add an apple, we're gonna add a strawberry, berry, comma, and we're gonna add an orange, comma, and a watermelon. So if we send these values to the console, fruits, we're gonna have something like this. If we wanna sort this alphabetically, you can add something like dot sort and save this, and now you can see we have apple, banana, orange, strawberry, and the watermelon. And you can mix, for example, the methods. You can see here we have sort. Let's say that we want the watermelon at the first position. You can use that reverse. And now you can see we're applying 2 different methods, and the result is the expected. So let's see how we can, for example, sort the numbers in numbers. So we're gonna add const array numbers. It's going to be equals to 3, 1, 104, 6, 7, 3. We're gonna add a bunch of different values. And then we're gonna send this value to the console log. Array numbers, save this, and then we're gonna add array numbers dot sort. So save this, and now you can see we have 1, and then we have another 1. Then we had 100, and then we have 40, 25. And you can see the 7 is right here. So this is going to sort only the first number, but you can see 100 should be at the end. Well, in this case, you have to write a function. Order from lower to the greater number. It's going to be like this. We're going to add this function, that sort, and then we're going to pass a function. It's going to take two values, number 1 and number 2. And then we open the curly braces, and then it's going to return the number 1 minus the number 2. And number 1 should be here. Save this, and now you can see it's going to sort this as expected. The number 100 is going to be on the end. Also, for example, if you want to sort this in the reverse order, you can copy this. And we can add something like here. Copy this, paste from greater to lower. And in this case, you only have to change the order. Like this. Save this, and now you can see 100 now is in the first position. And this is how you can sort an array of numbers. The array of characters or strings doesn't have this problem, but the array of numbers, you can see how you can make this using this function. So in the next video, let's continue learning the fundamentals of JavaScript. We're gonna take a look at JavaScript Objects. So let's start working with JavaScript Objects. In JavaScript, an object is very similar to an array in a lot of ways. Objects have properties attached to them, and these properties are defined by you when you are creating the objects, and you have access to these properties and the values using a dot in JavaScript. So let's start working with the code. We're gonna add something here, objects, and you define, for example, an object using a var, a variable, using const or let. I'm going to add a const right here. We're going to define a person. It's going to be equals. The first difference between an array and an object is that when you are creating arrays, you use the square brackets. In the case of objects, you will use the braces or curly braces like this. And this is going to be a good indicator that this is an object in JavaScript. So as I said before, you have to add a property. So we're going to add, for example, right here, I'm going to add name, and this is going to be the property. And then we give a value. I'm going to add my name. You can add yours. Then we're going to add the last name. This can be first name in this case. First name and last name. And I'm going to add my last name. Then we add a comma. And notice that we have, same as we have in arrays, in between each of these properties, you will have a comma. Then we're going to add a comma. And we're going to add another property. This one is going to be job. It's going to be web developer. Then we add a comma, and then I'm going to add another one, an email, email@mail.com, something like this. And this is going to be our object. So we can send this to the console, console.log, person, and save this. And now you can see we have the object right here on the console. So if you remember, when we were working with arrays, we access them by the position, by the index. In this case, you will access this by this property, and you need to add a dot right here. Dot, and I'm going to add, for example, first name. And this is going to print only Juan right here. You can, for example, copy this and paste. And I'm going to add, for example, the email right here, save this. Now you can see we have the name, and we also have the email. There is another syntax with the square brackets, and then you add email. And this property should be inside single quotes like this, email and email. This is similar to associative arrays in PHP, but this one is more common when you are developing in JavaScript. Using the dot is going to be much more common these days. So for example, you can see that we added this object. This has 4 properties, and all of them are strings. But an object can't hold any data type. So we're going to add more info right here. I'm going to add a comma where we can add something like an age. So for example, I'm going to add my age. Then we add a comma. You can add, for example, also an array, favorite music. An array, you can add something like trance, comma, rock, comma, grunge, comma, and then you add another property. So for example, you can have also an object inside another object, living, and we're going to open the curly braces here. So for example, my city is Guadalajara, and my country is Mexico. And right here, I'm going to add another one. So you can also add, for example, get age. You can also add functions. It's going to be a function. And this is going to return 31 like this. So let's access these values. You can see that we have first name. It's going to be right here. Let's access this age, for example. This one is different. And we're going to add age right here. You can see we have 31. We can also add this favorite music. And you can see we're going to have the array right here. And also this other object called living. So copy and paste right here. And you can see we have the other object. And also this method. Copy this and paste. And we're going to have here get age. You need to add the parentheses right here. You can see we have 31. When you're developing with objects, there is a keyword that is really important, and it's called the this keyword. This, like this. It's going to be really important. So let's add, for example, instead of having this get age and return 31, we can add something like this. I'm going to add a return new date, and then we're going to add get full year. This is going to return the current year. You can see we have 2080. And we're gonna rename this function to born year, like this. And I'm gonna show you something. I want to print the year where I was born. So you can add something like minus 31, and this is going to print 1987. We have the age right here, so if I add something like minus age, you can see that we have a problem. It says age is not defined. So here is the importance of using the this keyword. When you have an object like this, you can access other properties, for example, this age or this job, by adding the this keyword, this.age. And now you can see that we have the year where I was born. So let's add another method. Normally a function is called a method when it's inside an object. So we're gonna add a comma right here, and I'm gonna add something like get job. This is going to be a function that is going to return this job like this. It's going to be really simple. I'm gonna remove all of these, and I'm gonna change the born year to get job. And now you can see we have get web developer here on the console. And you can see we have web developer, and everything is working just fine. So an object can hold a lot of different data types, a lot of information. Even it can hold functions, you can see here. So they are a really important topic in JavaScript. So finally, let's review, for example, arrays and objects in one example. I'm gonna remove everything from here. And we're gonna create an array of objects. So we're going to add let cars. This is going to be an array. You can see we have the square brackets, but then I'm gonna open the braces. So this is going to be an object. Then we're gonna have a model. We're going to add Mustang. Then we're gonna add the engine. It's going to be 6.0. Not really sure if that's the engine that you will find in a Mustang, but this is just an example. Model, Camaro. Then we're gonna add engine. Let's add something like 6.1. And finally, let's add another one, model Challenger. And the engine is going to be 6.1. So notice that the last item in the array doesn't have the comma right here. And also the last item in the object doesn't have the comma right here. So if we send this to the console, console.log cars, you can see that we have an array, and this array contains 3 different objects. So how you can loop through this array of objects, you can add something like this, and I'm going to add 4, and of course we're going to cover 4 in upcoming videos, but I'm going to show you something. Let e equals to 0. This is going to be the initialization of the for loop. Then we're going to loop this cars.length. So we're going to run this only 3 times. And then we're going to increase the value. This is a standard for loop. You can see we have something like this. The for loop is in 3 parts. The initialization, then the condition, and then the increment. Finally, we're going to add something like console.log. And we're going to add cars. So inside this, we're going to add the square brackets. And we're going to add the position. This position is going to be E. So we're going to start at position 0. Then we're going to increment. So it's going to be 0. Then it's going to be 1. And then it's going to be position 2. So this is going to print the 3 values. That. And we want to print the model like this. Save this. And now you can see we have Mustang, Camaro, and Challenger. And this is going to be really common when you are developing in JavaScript. Create arrays or objects and loop through them using the for loop. Also, there are many ways to loop through an array or an object. There are several methods. We're going to cover those in upcoming videos. So this is going to be it for the objects. In the next video, let's review again Const when we are working with objects and arrays. So let's continue working in the next video. So now that we have the knowledge about arrays and objects, let's review a topic that causes a lot of confusion between JavaScript developers. So for example, we're gonna const in arrays and objects. So for example, if we have a const variable, const name equals to 1, in this case, we send this value to the console, name, you can see it's working just fine. But if you want to add something like name equals Pablo, in this case, this is going to print an error because a constant cannot be reassigned. So let's review, for example, creating an array. We're going to add const name and we're going to add 1, 2, 3. We're going to add something like new array. Remove this and like that. So you can see that the array is working and is printed right there. So for example, there is a lot of confusion between developers because when you create an array using the const, a lot of developers think that this value cannot be changed, but you can change these values individually. So for example, if you add something like new array at the position 0, you can add something like new element in the array. An array like this. You can see that we have new element in the array. You can also add something like new array that push something new. And now you can see we have a new element in the array, and also we have something new. So when you have a const variable and you have an array, you can override the values, but you need to access them individually. What is forbidden, for example, is if you add something like this, new array equals to 9, 8, and 7. This is going to cause an error because you are assigning this whole array into the array, and you cannot do that. But if you access the values individually, of course you can override these values. If I remove this, I saw something really weird. Yeah, we have push right here. Push should be inside parentheses. That was my error. You can see now we have something like this. Open this and I can see we have something new. But you can continue adding or removing elements in the arrays. You can pass, for example, all the methods that we saw previously when we were working with arrays. So the same goes for objects. If you add something like const card, and then you create an object, name, we're gonna add Mustang. Let's add an engine, something like 6.4. Not really sure if that's the engine of the Mustang. If we add console log.car, you can see that we have name Mustang and the engine 6.4. If you add something like this, for example, car.name equals to Challenger, this is going to override the value. You can see we have Challenger and the engine is going to be the same. But again, you have to access the value individually. If you want to reassign this car equals to a whole new object like this, name a new car, engine, something like 2.0, is going to cause an error because you cannot reassign the whole variable. You can only assign the values, but you have to access these properties again by their own, for example, the name or the engine. So that's going to be really important. So in the next video, let's see how you can create your own functions in JavaScript. So let's continue in the next video. So in this video, let's take a look at functions in JavaScript. This is going to be a really important topic, so we're gonna make this in 2 videos. So first, I'm gonna add the comment functions. And then I'm going to explain a function, how you can create your own functions. So for example, there are several ways to create a function. The first one is called function declaration. So you add the keyword function like this. This is a keyword that exists on JavaScript, and this will tell JavaScript that we want to create a new function. So we're going to add hello visitor. Then you open a parenthesis, and then you open the curly braces. Everything that is inside the curly braces is going to be the body of the function. So you can add something like this, console.log, and you can send a message, hello and welcome to our website, like that. So if you save this, you can see that nothing is happening because we have this console.log and there is no message in the console. Well, when you create your own functions like this, you have to call the function. So we're going to add a function must be called. And you call the function just by adding this. Hello visitor, and then the parentheses. And then you add the semicolon at the end. So this is going to execute the function. And now you can see we have hello and welcome to our website. You can also pass arguments to functions. This will make your functions more smart. And an argument is going to be a value from the outside of the function that is going to be added inside the function. So right here we have hello visitor. And I'm going to add right here the argument. I'm going to call this one, for example, name. And then right here we have hello visitor. I'm going to add my name, Juan. Then I'm going to remove these single quotes because I'm going to use the template string. So remember that you have to use the backtip. Backtip here and also right here. Then I'm going to add hello right here, and I'm going to add the $sign, open the curly braces, and then I'm going to add the name of the argument. So it's going to print the name Juan. It's going to be added inside the body of the function. So save this. Now you can see we have hello Juan and welcome to our website. So you can pass all the arguments that you need. So for example, I'm going to add my last name. And right here I'm going to add a comma. And this is going to be last name. This one is going to be the first name. So we add first name like this. Paste right here, and I'm going to copy this and paste right here. Select this, paste right here, and change this last name to something like this. So we can save this, and now you can see we have hello Juan de la Torre and welcome to our website. So you can see that here we are passing 2 different arguments into the function. So let's say that we remove one of these. You can see that we are only sending 1, but our function expects 2. Save this, and now you can see we have hello Juan. Then we have undefined because this variable doesn't have any value. So you can fix this using something called the default parameter. And they are like this. So for example, here on the first name, I'm going to add equals. And I'm going to add something like single quotes. Last name, I'm going to add also equals, and I'm going to add single quotes. If I save this, you can see that we only have hello Juan, and we have the single quotes, but we don't have the error. Of course, you can add something here, for example, visitor, and you can, for example, remove this, and this is going to print visitor. You can also add, for example, the last name, my last name here, for example, and you can see we have Juan, and since we don't have the second parameter, it's going to print the default value, which is this one. And this is the new way to create default parameters, because if we remove these, let's remove everything. In the earliest version of JavaScript, the code should be something like this. If type of first name is equals to undefined, then we're going to add first name equals to Juan, something like that. And then I'm gonna copy this, copy, paste, and I'm gonna add the last name. So this was the previous way of adding the default parameters, but you don't have to use this. The new way is much cleaner, and is the code looks more organized. You can see it's going to be like this. So let's create another function. We're going to add something like function addition, and this one is going to take two parameters. So it's going to be number 1 and number 2. Then this function is going to return number 1 plus number 2. So you can see that we have something different here because we are returning the value. There are two ways that you can create your functions. You can create a function like this one that is going to print the value in the body of the function, or you can create a function that is going to return the value like this one. And normally you will create a function that returns a value when you want to make something else with that value. But I'm going to show you this working. We're going to add addition, and we're going to add, for example, 1, 2. This is going to make the addition, 1 and 2. If I make something like this, you can see nothing is happening because we return the value, but normally you will return this into another variable. So we're going to add something like result. And then you will send that value to the console log result like this. And now you can see we have the number 3. So you can see we created this function and then we return the value. So we have the function here, and the value that is returned is going to be assigned to this result variable. So the idea behind the functions is that you can use this more than once. So for example, I'm going to add let result, then I'm going to add result equals, and save this. You can see we have 3, and we can call this again with different values. 10 and 15 is going to print 16, and also we can call this one again. So we're going to add 3, 4, and it's going to return 7. So basically a function is code that you can reuse more than one time, and you can see this looks more organized. So in the next video, let's review the other way of creating functions. We're gonna see of something called the function expressions. So let's continue working in the next video. So in the last video, we saw this function declaration. In this video, let's see something called the function expression. We're gonna remove all the code. Of course, I recommend that you keep all these codes where you can check them again. So we're going to add function expressions. And normally a function expression is going to be like this. Const sum is going to be equals to a function, and then we open the function body. We're gonna add something like this. Return number 1 plus number 2. Same example as we did in the previous video. Then we're going to add something like console.log, and then we're gonna add the name of the variable, sum. And we're gonna add the addition, we're gonna make the addition 3,3, something like that. So we're going to add the number 1 right here on the arguments, number 1, comma number 2. So save this, and now you can see we have 6. And we have the value of the function is going to be here on the sum. And again, you can reuse this all the times that you need. It doesn't matter that this is a const. You can use this all the times that you need. So for example, 4,8, and I'm gonna remove this. You can see we have 12. Again, we're going to add another one. It's going to be 40, 80, and finally it's going to be 24, 28, something like that. Now you can see we have the results. Using these kind of functions, you can also create default parameters. So for example, if you call this without any values, it's going to be empty. And it's going to be like that. It's going to be empty. You can see it says not a number. So you can add something here, for example, equals 0, which is going to be the default value, equals 0. So save this, and the value is going to be 0 when you don't pass anything into this function. There is another type of functions. These functions are invoked immediately, and they are called ifs. So we're going to remove everything. We're going to add a comment, functions that are invoked immediately, and they are called ifs, like this. And immediately invoke function expression. This is what if stands. So it's going to be like this, and maybe if you have already experience working with jQuery, this code may look familiar. It's going to be like this function, then you open parentheses, then you open the curly braces, and it's going to be like this. You need to add a parenthesis right here on the bottom. So you can add something like console.log. Yes, this is an ife. Like that. And you can see that we don't have to call this function. This is going to be executed right away once this file is read. So maybe you're asking how you can pass arguments to these functions. Well, that's why we have this parenthesis here on the bottom. I'm going to remove this message, and we're going to add something like learning. Then we're going to concatenate. We're going to add a plus sign. You can use also the template literals, and it's going to be technology. Then here on the top, we're going to copy this technology, and it's going to add right here the variable. Here on the bottom, we're going to add the value, JavaScript, like this. So save this, and now you can see we have learning JavaScript. So this is how you use ifs. There is another way that I'm going to show you. This is going to be the last one, and they are called the property methods. They look like an object, so we're going to add property methods. And remember, a function that is inside an object is called a method. So we're going to create something like const music player, and it's going to be equal. We're going to open the curly braces, so this is going to be an object. Then we have the property. It's going to be, for example, play. It's going to be a function. So open the curly braces, and we're going to add console.log. And let's add, for example, an ID right here. And we're going to add template literals, playing song with the ID. And then I'm going to add the $sign and open the curly braces, and I'm going to add that variable ID. And then I'm going to add the semicolon at the end. So you will call this property method by adding the music player, which is the name of the variable, then a dot, and then the play method. You can see that this is taking an ID as a song, so we're going to add something like 30, save this, and now you can see we have playing song with the ID and the number 30. So let's add another method. Right here I'm going to add another comma, and then we're going to call this one pause. We're going to add a function. This doesn't take any parameters, and we're going to add console.log, and inside single quotes we're going to add pause. So here on the bottom I'm going to add music player, and we're going to call this method pause. And now you can see we have playing, and then we have the pause. So you can add all the methods that you need right here. Also, something really important is that I'm going to add something here. Methods can be outside of the object. So you can create the methods outside like this. This name should be the same. So this name should match. And we're going to add remove. It's going to be equals to function. We're going to pass the ID. Open the function body, and we're going to add console.log. Inside template literals, we're going to add removing or remove from the playlist ID, and we're going to open the curly braces. We're going to pass the ID right here. So we're going to call this method by adding music player that remove, and maybe the song with ID 20. So you can see we have removed from my playlist the ID 20. So this is also how you can create functions using the property methods. So basically in JavaScript, you can create your own functions. But remember, JavaScript already has a lot of functions. So for example, console.log is a function that exists on JavaScript. You can see we have something like that. And there is also alert is another function. The prompt is another function. We have the alert, and then we have the prompt. And also the confirm is another function. You can see that we have the same structure. We have the name of the function and also the parentheses. But most of the time you're going to be creating the functions and also using the JavaScript functions like we did in this video. So in the next video, let's take a look at dates in JavaScript. I'm going to show you all the methods, or the most important methods that you can pass to dates in JavaScript. In this video, let's start working with dates. Also, we're going to work with the methods available in dates. So we're going to add dates. And dates in JavaScript are objects. So you have to create a new date. So we're going to add something like this. Const to date equals new date. So when you create a new date, by default, this is going to return the current date. So for example, I'm going to send this value to the console log today. Save this, and now you can see we have the date, the month, the number of the day, also the year, and the current time. Everything is going to be by default when you create a new date in JavaScript. You can also pass, for example, const birthday is going to be equals to new date. And you can pass, for example, the same order that we have here, the month, the day, and the year. So my birthday is on January 5, and I was born in 1987. And we're going to send this value to the console. So you can start also the day like this, save this, and now you can see that January 5 in the year 1987 was on Monday. This is going to be returned by the date. So there are two ways. You can create the current date, or also you can give the initial value, and it's going to create the date from these values. So let's remove this. And I'm going to create also a new variable. We're going to call we're going to call this one output. And we're going to print this into the console. So for example, there is another way that you can use. If you remember, we added birthday like this, new date, and we added January 5 in 1987. It's going to be like this. We're going to add output equals to birthday. And now you can see we have the date. There is another way, and I'm going to add a comment right here that says month, day, and year. There is another way, and I'm going to add something like birthday equals to new date again. And in this case, we're going to use 1 which is the month, the date, and the year. This is also another way that you can create a date in JavaScript when you give an initial value. Of course, if you don't pass anything, it's going to create the current date. So I'm gonna remove the spaces and I'm gonna comment these lines. So let's see the methods that you have, methods in dates, when you're working in JavaScript. So we're gonna create the output. You can see we have this today. If we save this, you can see this is the current date. But for example, you can add something like dot get month, and this is going to return the current month. It's going to print the month based, for example, in an array where the first month is actually the number 0. Let's review another one. We're gonna add output equals to date, get date. This is going to be another method. You can see we have 23. This is the current day of the month. Equals, and there is another one called get day. This is going to print the day of the week, second day of the week. This is also going to start from zeros, being, for example, Sunday is going to be 0, Monday is going to be 1, and so on. So we're going to add another one, output equals to date, and we're going to add, for example, get full year. Get full year is going to return the current year, 2080. We're going to add today. We're going to add another one. We're going to get minutes, and this is going to return the current minutes. We have also output today, get hours. This is going to print the hours in a 20-hour daytime. So we're going to add also output equals to date, a dot. And for example, if you remember, we added get full year. This is going to print 2080. We have these get methods, but we also have available set methods. So for example, if you add something like output equals to date, set full year to 2000, and then you add output equals to date, today get full year, and I'm gonna remove this. Like this is going to print the year 2000, because the same way that you have get to retrieve the value, you have set with the same name to change the actual value. So for example, if I add something like output equals today, and we add something like get month, this is going to print 0. But if we add something like today, set month to 10, this is going to change the current month. So you can see we have something like this, and we can change this from output to today, and now you can see we have November 23 and the year 2000. So basically this is the basics of dates, and you can see how you can create the current date. Also, you can create a date giving an initial date with 2 different methods, and we saw how you can retrieve the values. All these values can be accessed individually, and also you can change those values also individually using get or set methods. So in the next video, let's start working with control structures. We're gonna see if statements, and also else, and finally else if. So let's continue working in the next video. So let's review the control structures in JavaScript. A control structure will tell JavaScript the flow where this program should be executed. It's like the steps or the path that this program must follow. So first we're gonna take a look at the if operator. It's going to be really easy. We're gonna add something like const learning JavaScript, and we're gonna add something learning JavaScript equals to true, and then you can add something like if learning JavaScript. We're gonna add console.log, and if this is true, we're gonna execute this code. Great. And if it's not true, we're going to execute this code. JavaScript is great. So we can save this, and now you can see we have great. So since this is true, it's going to execute this line. In case that this is false, you can see we have so bad JavaScript is great. So you can control how this program is going to run if the condition is met. Here inside the if statement, this is the condition that JavaScript is going to check. So for example, you can use the comparison operators. Let's remove everything from here. And I'm going to add const score equals to 100. We're going to check for equal. If the current score is equal to 100, we're going to print console.log. Yes, is the same. Something like that. Else console.log. No, it's not the same. So you can see here we're using the comparison operators that we saw in the previous videos. And we're running these pieces of code based on these conditions. So you can see, yes, it's the same. If we change this to 200 like this, you can see we have no, it's not the same. So when you have an if statement, this is going to be executed if this condition is met. In the other hand, this is going to be executed. So in an if statement, only one of these is going to be executed, but not the two are not going to be executed when you have this in an if statement. So here we have equal. We're going to comment this line and we're going to take a look at not equal. We already saw this, but we're going to add this in an if statement. If we add score not equal to 100, then this is going to be executed. Yes, different. And then we're going to add an else statement. This is going to be console.log. No, not different. So something like this, and you can see we have, yes, they are different. If we add something like 100 right here, we're going to print the other value. No, they are not different, because we're checking if the condition, or in the condition, we're checking if this is not equal. So if you remember, we have the strict comparison operator, which consists in 3 equal signs. So let's add something like this. We're going to add 100 like this, and we're going to add, I'm going to comment this. Strict comparison operator. And we're going to add something like this. Score equals equals equals, and we're going to add 100 in single quotes. Console log. Yes, they are different. I'm going to escape the quote right here. They are different. Like this. And they are the same. Else right here. Console.log. No, they are different. And so I'm going to escape this. They are different. Something like this. So save this. And now you can see we have not, they are different, because again, the strict comparison operator is going to check the value, which is 100 in both of these, but also is going to check the data type. In this case, this one is a number, and this one is a string. So this is going to print something like this. If you add only 2 equal signs, it's going to check, yes, they are the same, because this is going to check only for the value, which in both cases is 100. So I recommend that you always check with the strict comparison operator. That's my recommendation. So the same as we have the strict comparison operator for equals, we have this for not equal. It's going to be like this. So save this, and you can see we have, yes, they are the, well, this is not they are the same. Yes, they are different. Here on the bottom, this is going to be, yes, they are the same. We're going to swap these lines, and you can see we have, yes, they are different. If we remove these quotes and we make this the same, you can see we have, no, they are the same, because they are not different. So I'm going to remove everything from here. To continue adding more examples, we're going to check, for example, check if a variable has a value. So we're going to add a score of 1000, and we're going to add score. And we're going to check if there is a score. We're going to add console.log. We're going to use template literals. Yes, and the score is, and we're going to add the $sign curly braces, and we're gonna pass that score into this console.log. Else we're gonna add console.log, no score. So save this, and now you can see we have yes, and the score is 1000. If we remove this, and since this is a const, this is going to, well, it needs to requires a initial value, we're gonna change this to let. Save this, and now you can see we have no score. So using this if score, this is going to check if this variable has a value. There is another way that you can use. For example, if you can add if type of score is not undefined, it's going to be like this. You can see we have no score. So this is also another way. If the score is not undefined, because if you send this to the console.log type of score, you can see that this is actually undefined because this variable exists, but it doesn't have any value given. So let's review another, I'm gonna remove this, another comparison operator. So for example, we're gonna add something like let. Cash, we're going to add 500. Let, and we're gonna add car total is going to be equals to 300, something like this. Then we're gonna add an if statement. If the cash is greater than the car total, that means that we can pay. So we're gonna add console.log successful payment. Else, we're gonna add something like console.log, and we're gonna add insufficient funds. So save this, and you can see we have successful payment. So this is going to check if the cash, this variable number, is bigger than this car total, then it's going to execute this line, successful payment. In the case that we have 600 in the car total, that number is greater than the cash, and you can see that this condition is not met, so it's going to fall in the else statement, and it's going to print insufficient funds. You can also change the direction of this. You can add something like this, and in this case you can see that the cash is lower than the car total. You need to swap this in order to make this sense. You can see if the cash is less than the car total, we have insufficient funds. So for example, let's add 600 in both cases. You can see that we have successful payment. The cash lower than the car total, you can see that this condition is not met because they are the same. So basically this is falling over here. In this case, we can also return this like this to make this sense. And you can see we have insufficient funds. But for example, you can see we have 600 and 600, so we can make the payment. You can add something here like equals. And this is going to check if the car total is equal or greater than, then it's going to make the payment. Also, if you want to make something like this, you can add in the greater or equal than the car total. So in this case, we are checking if the cash money that we have available is greater than or equal to the car total, then you have to print the successful payment, and this is the result that we have here. So you can see that we have greater than, lower than, greater or lower or equal also. And for example, when you only have one line in your if statements, you can skip these braces. You can remove all of them, and the result is going to be the same. You can see we have successful payment. My recommendation is to always use them. This is going to make your code more cleaner, more organized, and I think it's a good habit to add the curly braces always when you have the if statements. But of course, that's a personal preference. So in the next video, we're going to introduce the use of the else if. Currently we have if, and this is going to check one condition. We can add something called the else if, which is going to check the if for one condition, or the else if is going to check for another condition. And then if the both conditions are not met, it's going to fall on the else statement. So let's review that in the next video. So let's review the usage of the else if statement. So for example, we're gonna remove this and we're gonna add else if right here. So I'm gonna add let current time and we're gonna add something like 10. And we're gonna add if the current time is lower or equal than 10 hours. We're gonna add console.log good morning. Then we're gonna add else if. So this is going to check for a different condition than the first one. It's going to be like this. And we're gonna add current time is lower or equal to 80. We're gonna add console.log and we're gonna add good afternoon. And finally, if both conditions are not met, this one or this one, we're gonna fall into the else statement, which is going to be good night, like this. So you can see we have the 10 a.m., for example, 10 hours of the day. So this is going to print good morning. So save this and you can see we have good morning and it's printing the value just fine. So for example, this condition is being met and it's going to run this code. So let's add something like 15. Save this and now you can see we have good afternoon because this condition is not met, but this one is met and it's going to print good afternoon. So let's add something like 20, and now you can see we have good night. Both of these conditions are not met, but this one, the else statement, is going to be executed. So let's review what happens if we add something like 28, something like that. It's going to print good night, and we all know that there are no 28 hours in the day. So right here, you can copy this, paste, and we're going to have 3 conditions. This one, and this one. And we're going to add 24 right here. We're gonna cut this and replace this code. And finally, I'm going to add console.log. And we're gonna add invalid. So save this, and now you can see we have invalid. If we add something like 20 here, this is going to print good night, and now you can see everything is working. But let's review, for example, what happens if we add -3. You can see that we have good morning, and of course this is also an invalid time of the day. So here you can use, for example, the AND operator, and it's going to be like this. We're going to add an if right here. We're going to add current time is greater than 0, and this is going to check for an end, and the AND operator is going to check that this condition and this condition, both conditions, should be met in order to run this. We're going to change this to 12. Then here on the afternoon, we're going to add another one. Current time is greater than 12, because you can see here we're checking is lower or equal, so we need to add greater than 12. There is also, we can add greater than or equal to 13, but I'm going to add greater than 12. Of course, you can add the other value. And we're going to add end, the current time is less than or equal to 80. Finally, we're going to add another one. We're going to copy this. And in this case, I'm going to add greater than 80 and less than, current time is less than or equal to 24. So let's save this. And now you can see we have invalid, because we're checking that these both conditions are met. The current time is greater than 0, but also is less than or equal to 12. So let's add something like 3. Save, and you can see we have good morning. If we add 12, you can see that we have also good morning. So in this case, both conditions are met, and this is going to print good morning. Let's add something like 15 here. Save this, and now you can see we have good afternoon, because again, this 15 is greater than 12 and is lower or equal to 80, and it's going to print this. Finally, if we add 20 right here, is going to print good night, because again, both conditions are met. And if we add 28, you can see this is going to be invalid. So this is a nice example of the usage of the if statement. Also the else if, we're checking 4 different conditions in 2 different else if. And finally, we have a fallback in this else statement. So let's review the OR operator. We're going to remove this. We're going to introduce OR operator. And we're going to add if. Well, let's create 3 different variables. We're going to add cash. It's going to be 300. Let credit is going to be also 300. We can add a comma here so we can skip the let keyword. And we're going to add card totals. It's going to be 500, something like this. So we're going to add if card totals is less than the cash that we have available, and OR statement, we're going to add OR operator right here. Card totals is less than the credit. So that means that we can pay. Console.log. You can pay with cash or credit. Else, we're going to add console.log, and we're going to print insufficient funds. So the OR operator is going to check at least for one of these conditions, this one or this one. If one of these is met, it's going to run this. If none of these conditions is met, it's going to run this code. So save this, and let's save this. You can see we have insufficient funds because the card totals are greater than the cash, and also the card totals are greater than the credit. So none of these conditions are being met. But if we add something like 800 here, you can see we have you can pay with cash or credit. This condition is not met, but this one does. So the OR statement is going to check only for one condition. And you can see that this condition is met, and this is going to run this code. So let's create a more advanced example. We're going to add an else if right here. Else if, and we're going to create a new variable called available. If the available is greater than or equal to the card totals, then we're going to add console.log pay with both. And in the case that it doesn't, we don't have the funds, it's going to print insufficient funds. So we need to create this available variable. We're going to add a comma, and available is going to be equals to cash plus the credit. So we're going to add 300 here again, 300, and the totals are going to be 500. So save this, and now you can see we have pay with both, because this condition and this condition are not met. So this one is going to skip, but then it's going to check the available, which is going to make the addition 300 plus 300, and that's going to be more than the card totals. In case that, for example, that these card totals are 800, none of this is going to be met. This one, or this one are not met. It's going to run this else statement. Finally, let's add some money here. For example, 1000 in cash. We're going to save this. And now you can see we have you can pay with cash or credit, because this condition is met. This one is not, but the OR statement is only checking for one. So this one is going to be executed. So this one was a more advanced example. We're going to remove everything from here. And the last step is going to be the ternary operator. We're going to add ternary. Ternary is going to be like a shorthand if statement. So we're going to add something like const logged in. We're going to add something like false. And we're going to add something like console.log. And right here we're going to check this variable logged in if is equal to true. And this is going to be like an if statement, but it's going to be in one line. So we're going to add the question mark, and here we're going to add the user is logged in. Then we're going to add the colon, and this is going to be like an else statement. not logged in. Please log in. So you can save this, and now you can see we have false. So I'm gonna make this a little bigger so you can see better the word code. So this is really similar as having something like this. If logged in, this is going to be the condition. This is going to be equal to this. Actually, it's going to be like more like this. So this is going to be the condition. This is this part. Then this question mark, this part is going to be the code right here. And then the code after the colon is going to be this. But this is called the ternary operator, and you can see that the syntax is a little different, but it's the same as this if statement. Also has the advantage that all the code is in one line. So you can save this. You can see we have not logged in. Please log in. And if we change this variable to true, it's going to print the user is logged in. So in the next video, we're gonna take a look at switches. They are like an if statement, but they will offer a more consistent way, a more organized way. So we're gonna take a look at those in the next video. So in this video, we're gonna check the switch statement. The switch statement will evaluate an expression. It will check for a case and execute the statement that is going to be associated with that case. So we're going to add something like this. We're going to add a comment, switch. It's going to be like this. We're going to add, for example, a variable right here, const payment method, and we're going to add something like cash. So then we're going to start our switch statement. Switch. Then we open the parentheses, and this is going to be the expression that we are going to evaluate. Then we open the curly braces, and this is going to be the body of the switch statement. So right here we want to evaluate this payment method. Then we're going to write the cases. So we're going to add case, and we're going to add, for example, cash. And we're going to add the statement that is going to be associated. For example, when the expression that we are evaluating is cash, is going to execute this code. Console.log. And I'm going to add the template literal. We're going to add your payment method is, and I'm going to add the $sign, curly braces, and we're going to select the payment method right here. The switch statement also requires a break. So we're going to create another cases right here. We're going to add another one. Let's add another one. So for example, the second one is going to be a check. So check. We're going to add your payment method is, and right after this, I'm going to add, we will verify the funds, something like that. Then we're going to add the card is going to be another case that we want to evaluate. So it's going to be your payment method is, and we're going to add right here, processing, something like that. So we're going to save this, and now you can see that we have your payment method is cash. We're going to change this. We're going to add, for example, card. And now you can see we have your payment method is card, and we have processing. And also we have check. So we're going to check right here. So you can see we have your payment method is check, and we will verify the funds. So maybe you add something here, for example, nothing. And you can see that we are not printing anything. So in the switch statement, you will have something called the default. We're going to add default, and we're going to send this value to the console. Please select a valid payment method. And this will also require a break. So break like this, and now you can see we have please select a valid payment method. So you can see that this looks more cleaner than the if statement, but switches are not really common in JavaScript. Actually, not really common in any programming language. but I think I like the syntax of the switch. For me, they look more cleaner than if statements, but obviously the if statements are more common. So this is the switch statement. We're going to remove everything from here. We're going to create another example. Here we're going to assign a variable from the switch case. So we're going to add something like this, and we're going to add a const is going to be equals to cars, the same array with cars that we have added before, Camaro, Mustang, and Challenger. We're going to add something like this. Then we're going to add, for example, let car, and we're going to print the card based on the selection of the switch statement or the value. So we're going to create a new variable called, for example, const select. It's going to be equals to 2 at the moment. We have an array, so this one is going to be 0, this one is going to be 1, and this one is going to be number 2. So we're going to evaluate this select, and then we're going to write the cases. We're going to add case 0. In this case, it's going to be car. The variable car is going to be equal to cars at position 0. Then we are going to add the break. So we're going to add 2 more lines, 2 more copies of this, like this. Then the case is going to be 1 right here, 1 right here, 2, 2 here, and 2. So finally, we're gonna append this value into the car variable. So it's going to be available right here. So we're going to add console.log, and your selected car is, we're gonna add $, curly braces, and the variable car. So you can see we have selected number 2. So it's going to add the car that is on the index 2 from the array. It's going to be added into the variable called car. So save this, and now you can see we have your selected car is a Challenger. So let's say that we added number 0 is going to be the Camaro, and finally the number 1 is going to be the Mustang. So you can also, for example, in the previous example, we print the value in the cases, but you can also, for example, give the variable any value, and then print that value outside of the switch statement. Those are the most common scenarios that you will face when you are working with switch statements. So in the next video, let's continue working. We're gonna take a look at for loops. In this video, we're gonna start working with the for loop. The for loop is used to run a code or a statement until a condition is met. So we're gonna add right here for loops. We're gonna add for and the parentheses and then the curly braces. So here inside the parentheses, the for loop will consist on 3 parts. So we're gonna add, for example, the first one is going to be the initial value. We're gonna add let e equals 0. Normally you will find this as this. Normally a for loop is going to start at 0, and normally you will find this variable also, which is called the index. So then we're going to add a minus 10. This is going to be called the condition. So this for loop is going to run until this a is less than 10. And the third part is going to be the increment. So each time this code is running, this value is going to be incremented by 1. So we're going to add console.log, and we're going to add template literals. We're going to add number, and right here I'm going to add the $sign, open and close the curly braces, and we're going to print this index. So save this, and now you can see we have number 0, number 1, and it's running until number 9. So let's review the code again. So you can see where the initial value is going to be 0. You can see we have number 0 right here. This is the beginning of the for loop. Then we have the condition. So this is going to run until the I is less than 10. So for example, you can see we have number 0. So it's going to execute this code. Then it's going to increment by 1. So in the next iteration, let is going to be equal to 1. it's going to evaluate right here, and it's going to say, well, 1 is less than 10, of course, and it's going to create another iteration, and it's going to run until it's 9. Once the for loop or the index is the value is 10, it's going to evaluate right here again, and it's going to be is 10 less than 10, and this is going to evaluate as false, and the for loop is going to be stopped from running. If you want to print the number 10 here, here on the condition, we can add something like I minus 10. We can add something like I minus or equal to 10, and this is going to run until the number 10 is right here. So you can see that this code is running 11 times until this condition is met, and that's where for loops are really helpful. So for example, let's read a value in the for loop, and we're gonna comment these lines. We're gonna add again 4, and we're gonna add let I equal 0, I minus 10, and then we're gonna increment. Always we're gonna increment by 1 when you have a for loop, is recommended. Then we're gonna add the following. We're gonna check, for example, if the increment is equals to 2, or the index, we're gonna print something like this, console.log. Yes, 2, something like that. And we're going to add, for example, right here, console.log, and we're gonna print this. So copy this and paste. So it's going to be like this. We're gonna check when we have I equals 2, and it's going to print this message. So save this. Now you can see we have number 0, number 9, and when this index is 2, it's printing yes 2. And then you can see it continues printing the number 2. If you wanna remove this number 2, you can add here the keyword continue. Save this, and now you can see we have number 0, number 1, and the number 2 is yes, and then we have 2. And this doesn't print the number 2 because we added continue. And continue is going to stop this from running, and it's going to loop again. So it's going to prevent that the number 2 is being printed. You can also break the for loop. So we're gonna copy this and paste because it's really similar. So we're gonna make a copy. We're gonna comment these lines, and instead of having continue, we're gonna have break right here. The rest is going to be the same. So when we are in the number 2, this is going to break the for loop. So save this. Now you can see we have number 0, number 1, and when the index is equal to 2, it will print the yes 2, and it's going to break the for loop. It won't complete the condition because this break is going to stop from running everything. So let's review. For example, I'm gonna comment this, the for loop, and if you remember in the math video we saw the modulos. So we're gonna copy and paste this. I'm gonna remove everything from here, and right here, for example, I'm going to add an if statement. If the index, and then we're gonna use the modulo between 2 is equal to 0, then we're gonna add console.log, template literals right here. I'm gonna add the $, curly braces, the index. We're gonna add something like is even, and we're gonna copy this, else, and we're gonna add that this increment is odd. So save this, and now you can see we have number 0 is even, number 1 is odd, number 2 is even, because when you divide a number between 2 and the residuum or the remnant is 0, that means that this number is even. And you can see we have this exercise, something that can be done with a for loop and the if statement, also the modulo operator. So finally, let's review an example of the for loop in an array. So we're gonna add something here. I'm gonna make some space right here. So let's create a constant. We're gonna add for loop for a shopping cart. Let's say that we have a constant called shopping cart. is going to be equal to an array. So we add the square brackets, then we add product1, comma, product2, and the product3, like this. So normally you will access this, access each value manually. It's going to be something like this, console.log, and then shopping cart, then position 0, and also position 0, 1, and 2, because we only have 3 items in the array. So we have product 1, product 2, and product 3. You can access these values easier with a for loop, because imagine that you have a shopping cart with 100 items. You have to add 100 lines like this one. So a for loop normally is a good way to loop through an array. So we're going to remove this. We're going to add for let e equals to 0, let I equals to 0. Then we're going to add, for example, you can see we have 3 items, 0, 1, and 2. So we can add something like -3, and then we're going to add I++. So I'm going to add console.log, and then we're going to add template or string literals, product. And then we're going to add the $, curly braces, and we're going to open this shopping cart array. Then we're going to pass the index inside the square brackets, like this. So save this, and this is going to print product, which is right here, and also the name of the product, product 1, product 2, and product 3. So let's add a new product, product 4, save, and now you can see that this is only printing 3 different products. So we added a new product. We need to make change the condition, and now it's going to print 4 different products. Knowing how many products the shopping cart has is a little complex, because we have hard-coded the value. But you can use one of those array methods that we saw earlier. Shopping cart that length is going to print the length of the array, and you can see we have 4. So we can use this right here, and this is going to be more dynamically. If the array contains 2 products, it's going to run 2 times. If the array contains 20 products, it's going to run 20 times. And normally this is better. So you will save this. Now you can see we have 4 products. If I remove one of these, save, and you can see that this is running 3 times. If we add a new one, comma, and then we add a product 5, this is going to run 5 times, because we are getting the value from this dot length property or method that you will find in arrays, and this is going to be better. You can see that this is working just fine. So normally the for loop, I use the for loop with arrays, but there are other loops that you will find. In the next video, we're gonna take a look at the while and the do while loops that you will find in JavaScript also. In this video, we're gonna start working with while and do while loops. The for loop and the while loop are almost the same. The syntax is different, but they behave exactly the same. So we're gonna start with while loops. We're gonna add, for example, let I equals 0. So this is going to be the index, the initial index. Then we're gonna add while, we're gonna open parentheses. Here is where we are going to add the condition. Then we open the curly braces, and this is going to be the body of the while loop. So right here you can see we added this I, so we're gonna add I minus 10. Then you need to add, for example, the increment, and the increment is going to be added before the closing curly brace that we have here. So you can see that we have the 3 parts: the initial value, the condition, and the increment. This should be 10 right here. So then we're going to add the body, or the code that is going to be executed until this condition is met. Console.log, template or string literals again. We're gonna add number, and then we're gonna add the $sign, curly braces, and the index I. So save this, and now you can see we have number 0, number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the different numbers. So you can see that the syntax is different, but basically they are doing the same. So let's, for example, add the example that we saw from the previous video, looping an array with while. We're gonna create an array. Again, it's going to be called shopping cart. Just to make the same example, we're gonna add product 1, product 2, and product 3. Then we're gonna add the index, or the initial value. It's going to be let I equals 0. Then we're gonna add while, parentheses, and the body of the while loop. We're gonna add I minus, and again we're gonna use shopping cart.length. So this is going to print 3, and this is going to run only 3 times. Then it's really important to add the increment, otherwise it will cause you some errors. So then I'm gonna add console.log. We're gonna add product, and we're gonna add the $sign, then the curly braces, and we're gonna add shopping cart, and we need to print these array positions. We're gonna add inside the square brackets, we're gonna add the I variable. So we're gonna save this, and you can see we have product 1, product 2, and product 3. So we can copy this, make a comment right here, and add a new product. You can see now this is going to run 4 different times. So feel free to use the for loop or while loop, whatever you feel comfortable. So let's remove this. We're gonna use in this video, let's continue working. We're gonna take a look at do while loops. The main difference between a while and do while loops is that the do while loop will run at least 1 time. It doesn't really matter if the condition is met or not, it will run at least 1 time. So we're gonna see this in action. We're gonna create the initial value, then we're gonna open the curly braces, and right after this closing curly brace, I'm going to add while. Here is where you write the condition. So we're gonna add index minus 10. So this is going to run at least 10 different times. Right here, I'm going to add the increment. And before the increment, we need to add the code that is going to be executed. Number, and we're gonna add the variable and the index. Something like this. So save this. Now you can see we have number 0, number 1, and we have all the numbers through number 9. So the main difference between the do while loop and the while loop and for loop is that this is going to run at least 1 time. So for example, if I add something like 5,000 here, save, you can see we have number 5,000 because it's going to print this value. Then it's going to increment, and then it's going to check the value. But at this point, this value, at least 1, has been printed, and you can see we have 5,000 right here. If we add something like this, for let I equals 5,000, I minus 10, I plus plus, and we send this value to the console. I'm gonna copy this. It's going to be the same. Save. And you can see that this is not printed. The 5,000 is from this one. We can remove this, and you can see that it doesn't print anything, because again, the do while loop is going to execute at least once, while the for loop is going to check the condition first, and then it's going to print anything. So in the next video, we're gonna continue working with these loops. We're gonna see other ones, the for loop, another option, the for each loop, another one called the map. So see you in the next video. So in this video, we're gonna see other techniques to loop through an array. So first, we're gonna start with the for loop. We already saw this one. So let's create an array. To do, it's going to be, for example, homework, comma, food, comma, and we're gonna add also a project. It's going to be a to-do list, learn JavaScript. Then we're going to add the for loop. Let I equals to 0. Then we're gonna add I in minus to do that length. So it's going to loop 4 times because the length of the array is 4. Then we're going to add the index. Then we're gonna add console.log. And we're gonna add to do. And we're gonna add the position, which is going to be I. So save this, and you can see we have homework, food, project, and learn JavaScript. So I'm gonna comment these lines. Next, we're gonna take a look at for each. For each is a new way to loop through an array and other features that you will find in the JavaScript 6. So we're gonna copy this to do. I'm gonna uncomment this. We're gonna use the same array. And the syntax is like this. To do is going to be the name of the array. Then you add for each. Then you open parentheses. And this is going to be a function. Open parentheses again and open the curly braces. So right here is going to be the body of the for each. But you can see, for example, this is a to-do list. You need to pass a singular name. This is recommended. Of course, you can name this whatever you want. But I'm going to call this one assignment. And right here, I'm going to add console.log. And we're going to add $, open the curly braces, and we're going to add this variable assignment that we created right here. So save this. And now you can see that we have the same result. The for each is going to look more cleaner, and we're going to use this in all the projects. Here on the for each, inside the function, if you add a comma right here and you add the index, this is going to help you to print the index. So right here, for example, I'm going to add $, open the braces, and I'm going to add index. Something like this, and now you can see we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and also the items from the array. So this is the for each loop. Next, we also have map. We're gonna add something like this. I'm gonna add something different here. I'm gonna create a new array. So it's going to be const shopping cart. Again, it's going to be equals to an array, but this is going to be an array of objects, ID 1, and we're gonna add a product, which is going to be a book, comma, and I'm gonna make 2 more copies. And I'm gonna remove the last comma right here. I'm gonna add 1, 2, and 3. So this one is going to be, the first product is going to be a book. Second one is going to be a shirt. And the last one is going to be an album. And something like that. So we're gonna add the map, and it's going to be like this. Const product name is going to be equal to the array shopping cart in this case. Then we're gonna use a dot map, and we're gonna execute a function. And this is going to return the key that we have here that is called product. But first, for example, you can see we have shopping cart, so we need to pass this right here. And also we're gonna return the shopping cart dot product. Actually, let's rename this. I'm gonna name this, for example, product name. Yeah, product name like this, I think is better. And this one, these names should match. And also, for example, you can see we have a dot product, a dot because this is an object, and we want to access this product property. So everything is going to be added into the product name variable. So we can add something like console.log product name, and this is going to extract the product name for the 3 items in the shopping cart. So save, and you can see we have a book, a shirt, and an album. In JavaScript 6, you will find also something called the iterators. There is a whole video about iterators, but we're gonna make a small example, iterators in JavaScript 6. We're gonna create a new object my car is going to be equals to the curly braces. This is going to be an object. Let's add something like model. We're going to add a Camaro. Again, the engine is going to be 6.0, comma, the year. This is a classic Camaro. And finally, the make is going to be a Chevy. So we're going to add the iterator, and this is going to be more simpler than the for loop that we have right here. So this is something new. We're going to add for, and here you add let key in my car, something like this. Then you're going to add console.log, open the parentheses, template or string literal, and right here I'm going to add the $sign, open the braces, and right here I'm going to add the variable my car, and I'm going to add the square brackets, and then I'm going to pass this key like this. So save this, and now you can see we have Camaro, then the engine, which is 6, the year, and the make. So this is going to print the values from the object. If you want to print the keys, you can add here $sign, and I'm going to add the curly braces, $sign right here, and we're going to add this as key. I'm going to add this to separate this, so we're going to save, and now you can see we have access also to the keys, model, engine, the year, and the make, and also the values. So these are iterators. They are available in ECMAScript 6, and you can see that we also have the map, we also have for each, and the for loop. You can use all of these to loop into objects or arrays. So in the next video, let's continue working. We're almost done with the fundamentals. Then we're going to start moving into the window object and the DOM. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at the window object. So in this video, we're going to see what is the try catch. This is going to be something important. I'm going to show you what is the try catch with an example. I think it's going to be easier. So for example, let's say that you have a JavaScript code. Let's say that we have a function that is called getClients, and we add in the console.log, something like downloading. This is going to download the list of clients. Then we're going to add a set timeout. Let's add something like this. We're going to add a function. This function is going to be executed, for example, after 3 seconds, something like this. So we're going to add console.log, and we're going to add complete. So let's call this function getClients. Save this. You can see we have downloading, and then this is going to print complete. Something that is really common in JavaScript is that, for example, if you try to call a function that doesn't exist, so for example something, save this, you can see that this is going to print an error because it says something is not defined, this function is not defined. But if you have a problem like this one, you have an error in your syntax like this is going to stop the execution of this program, and this function is not going to work. So for example, let's say that you have a function like this. Chances are that you are executing a function that you are not really sure if the value is going to be valid or something. You can grab this inside something called the try catch. So you add try, then open the braces, and then you move this right here inside the try. Then you need to add catch right here. So in case that there is any error, this is going to be executed. This is going to try to execute this function. If this function is not defined, then it's going to throw this error. So we're going to console log the error. Error like this. Save this, and you can see that we have an error right here. The reference, it says something is not defined, but the code from the next function is going to be executed. And we have try, we have catch, and we have another one that is called the finally. Finally is going to be executed always. Execute always, no matter what. So save this. You can see that we have execute always, no matter what, because we have this something is not defined. Then it's going to execute downloading and complete. So one of the advantages of using the try catch is that it's not going to stop running the code, the program. The other functions are going to continue working. So let's say that instead of having something, we have get clients. You can see that this execute always, no matter what, is right here. Save this, and you can see that it's going to work if the function is defined, or if the function is not defined. This is going to be executed always. So there is a try catch, for example, if you already have experience with other languages, such as Java or PHP, they also provide a try catch. Normally I use the try catch in PHP, for example, when I'm querying the database. And for example, in the case that the server where the database is hosted fails or something, the code of the entire application is going to continue working. So normally I recommend that you grab code like that in the try catch. Don't add into the try catch, for example, a function that is going to add a simple class or change any text or something. Try to add only special functions into the try catch, functions that in case that it fails working, doesn't stop the complete program. So let's start working with the window object. The window object is going to be this window, this browser that we have here, but it contains several methods and functions that we can use. So for example, if you type window here and you hit enter, you will find this, or this is going to print this. I'm gonna expand this, and you can see, for example, we have the alert, and you can see we have an F. So this is a function that is attached to the window object. So we have alert, here on the bottom, for example, we have also the close, we have also confirm, some other functions that we already saw in the previous videos. We also have fetch, you have the document right here. This is going to print other information about the HTML in your website. So we have a lot of information here. So I'm gonna collapse this. So for example, we already saw the console.log function. The console.log is also a part of the window object. And when you type console.log or alert or other functions similar, you don't have to add window.console.log because they are part of the window object. But you can type something like this, window.console.log, and this is going to work because the console.log is part of the window object. You can skip this window. You can see it's printing console.log. It's going to print hello. So console.log belongs to the window object, and that's why you don't have to write window.console.log when you send the value to the console. I'm gonna clean this, and I'm gonna type window again, window. Here, for example, you can see that we also have alert. So you can add, for example, window.alert. And you can see it's printing, it works. But again, since alert is part of the window object, you don't have to type window, you only type alert. Like this, and it's going to work. So that's important. The window object will have a bunch of different methods and functions attached to the object. Prompt is another one. So for example, you can add window.prompt. And we can add something, what's your name? And you can see it's working. Also, if you skip the prompt, it's going to work because again, this is part of the window object. So let's see, for example, other components of the window object. I'm going to open again the code. We're going to see, for example, the confirm. We can add something like if confirm, and we can add something like are you sure? And then we can send to the console. Console.log is another component of the window object. We can add something like deleted else we can add something like console.log, nothing happens, and save this. You can see we have are you sure. If we click here on cancel, you can see it's going to print nothing happens. If I reload and click here on OK, you can see it's deleted because we are checking this confirm. If you click on OK, it's going to run this, and you click on cancel, it's going to run this part of the code. So I'm gonna comment these lines. And for example, let's retrieve the width and the height of the window. Retrieve width and height of the window. So we can add something like this. Let height and width of the document. Then height is going to be equals to the window. And we're gonna see a method called outer height. And the width is going to be window outer width. So now we can send these values to the console. Height and console.log width. So save it. Now you can see we have the height is going to be this one, 1052 pixels. It's going to be from here to the bottom. And also we have 629 pixels. This is going to be from here to here. If you only want the part here without the interface, without these developer tools, you can copy this, and there are another two methods called inner height and inner width. So save this, and now this is going to print only the part that is inside. So this inner height and inner width will, for example, ignore the developer tools, and it's going to print only this section right here. So we can do something with this, for example, this information that we saw. And I'm going to add, for example, right here, if, and we're going to add something like width. And if the width is greater than, let's add something like 1000, we're going to add document, that body, that styler. Of course, we're going to see this in action in upcoming videos. This is only a quick example of the usage of these inner width methods available in the window. We're gonna add something like this, the red, and style that background color. And I was missing something. Then we're gonna add something like else if, and check, for example, if the width is greater than 500, we're going to add a different color. Blue maybe. And in the else, all the other sizes, we're going to add a background color in green. So save this, and now you can see we have blue because the width is 572. If we make this a little smaller and then reload, you can see now it's in green. And if we make this bigger and reload, you can see the background color is in color red. So of course, this is something that can be done also with CSS, and it's going to be easier. I'm going to remove everything, and we're gonna continue working with this. We're gonna see, for example, in the window object, you will find something called the location. So we can add something like, for example, let URL location equals to window.location. So let's send this to the console.log URL location, so we can see a lot of different information. And we're going to expand this, and you can see, for example, we have the host, which is going to be this URL that we have here. So for example, you can send that value to the console.log URL location, and this is going to be an object, so we're going to add a dot, and we're going to add host. Now you can see we have the host right here, and we're going to expand this again. You can see, for example, we have the host, and this one contains the port. If you print the host name, this is going to print only the URL. So let's remove this, and we're going to add host name. And if you want to print the port, you can add port right here. So save this, and now you can see we have the URL with the port. We have the URL by its own, and the port in other line. You also have the protocol, so you can use this to check if the website is being served using HTTP or using HTTPS. And also, for example, you have right here an href. We can use this href to, for example, redirect via JavaScript. We can add something like this: window dot location dot href equals to http://google.com, like this. Save this, and this is going to redirect to Google. We need to remove this in order to return to our project. Finally, I'm gonna show you something. For example, here on we have the search. If we add a query string right here on the top, and we add something like ID equals 20 and name equals 1, and open this, here on the search, you will print this query string. And for example, you can grab that value and add search right here. I'm gonna remove the other three. So you can see we have the query string right here. And a lot of websites, especially e-commerce, use this kind of query string in their URLs. So in the next video, we're gonna continue working with the scope. This is going to be very important when you are working with variables and their values. So let's review those in the next video. So in this video, we're gonna take a look at something called the scope. A scope, and we're gonna add the name right here, scope, is the accessibility of variables, functions, and objects in your code. The scope will determine the visibility of variables and their values in your code. So let's add something like this. We're going to add var a equals to a, let b equals to b, const c equals to c, something like this. Then we're going to create a function. The scope of the function is called the function scope, like this. And then we're going to add function. We're going to add something like function scope, something like this, really simple. And then we're going to add, for example, these same variables, but we're going to change the values. In this case, I'm going to use A in uppercase, B, C, and we need to call this function. If you remember, we need to call the function in order to execute that. And finally, I'm going to add something else. We're going to add console.log, and we're going to add something called global. I'm going to explain this in just a little. We're going to add A, B, C, like this. Then I'm going to copy this, paste, and we're going to call this function scope, like this. So let's save this, and now you can see that we have function scope and we have ABC in uppercase. So we have these values right here. The other one says global and it's printing ABC in lowercase. This is right here. So these variables on the top are called or are part of something called the global scope. They are available in all the program. So for example, if you remove one of these, save this, you can see that we have function scope and we have A in lowercase, which is right here. And since this variable is in the global scope, it's going to be available in this function. But if we create this variable into the function, then it's going to check for the value that is inside of this function. It's going to check, for example, if the variable A is in this function, then it's going to use the value that is inside this scope. If this value is not available, then it's going to check in the global scope. If we remove also the global scope, then it's going to return that this is undefined. So these functions are in the global scope. That means that they are available in all the program, but these functions are in the function scope. So you create a new variable. Let's add something like let something equals to something. And we try to print this outside console.log something. You can see that we have something is not defined because this variable exists only in this function. but it's not available in the global scope like this. So the most important thing about the scope is that a global variable can be used in all the program, but a variable that is declared inside a function will be available only in that function. So we're gonna remove this something and also from here. There is also something called the block scope, which includes if statements or for. Anything that is delimited by the curly braces is going to be considered the block scope. So we're going to add something like if, let's add something like true, and open the braces. We're going to add let a equals to double a in uppercase, let b equals to double b equals here, and the const c is going to be double c in uppercase. So we need to send these values to the console.log, and we're gonna call this one block scope. So save this, and now you can see, for example, we have the function scope and it's printing ABC, these values, and then we are redeclaring this let ABC, but this is inside the block scope. So you can see this is printing double A, double B, and double C. If you remove one of these, then it's going to check the global scope. You can see we have block scope and we have A in lowercase, which is part of the global scope. And here on the globals, you can see that we have these variables on the top. Then we redeclare these variables, but thanks to the scope, JavaScript doesn't know about these variables. So it's printing the values that we have here in the global scope. These are ignored by JavaScript, since JavaScript doesn't know that this variable exists because they are in a function scope and these are in the block scope. So let's add a final example. Let's review, for example, the for loop. We're going to add for. We're going to add var a equals to 0, a minus 10, a plus plus, and we're going to send the value to the console.log a, and save this. And now you can see something strange just happened because we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and we have 9, but in the global scope we're printing the number 10. So this value from the a, this is being overridden, and you can see the global scope mixed that value. Something that is fixed if you add, for example, let. Save this, and now you can see we continue having console.log. We're printing from 0 to 9, but in the global scope we keep A, B, and C. So that's another difference between var and let. The scope is going to be different. And when you have var, when we have var, because let and const are new keywords, that causes a lot of confusion between developers, but that is fixed with let and const. So that's another reason to continue using let and const when you are working with JavaScript. So in the next chapter, we're going to start working with the DOM. Finally, we left the fundamentals back, and we're going to continue, or we're going to start working with the HTML. We're going to add some behavior, functionality, interaction to our websites. So we're going to start working with the DOM.